I call to order the budget work session of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Tarpon Springs on Tuesday, July 19, 2022 at 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mayor Vaticios,
Here.
Vice Mayor Lunt,
Here.
Commissioner Carr,
Here and ready.
Commissioner Eisner,
Here.
Commissioner Kulyas.
Here. Tonight is our first budget work session. We had a preliminary meeting earlier, but tonight we actually get into the funding. And we have another one scheduled for July 28th, and the city manager has broken up the departments. There's actually three parts to this evening. One is the department budgets, but we're only going to hear from public services, procurement, human resources, fire, police, information technology, and finance. On July 28th, we'll hear from the building department, cultural, economic development, city clerk, planning, public works, and public administration. And then also, we're going to talk this evening about the capital projects and the American Rescue Plan Act, as far as the funding for those. And then also, the city manager has some miscellaneous items that we're going to talk about as well. So for the purposes of the meeting, and hopefully we can get this done smoothly so that there isn't a whole lot of repetition, each department head will get up and be ready to answer questions. I don't know that there'll be any lengthy presentations, but they'll be there to answer questions. And Mr. Smith, if you'd like to get up, you're the first in line. Mr. Smith is responsible for recreation, cemetery, utility administration, water supply, water distribution, meter repair, water plant, sewage collection, sewage treatment, sewage lift stations, and golf course. I'm spelling these out because there's a number of people that are watching on television. I want to make sure they appreciate what each department head does. It's a fairly broad area, and what I'm going to do is go commissioner by commissioner, and then if a commissioner has a specific question on a particular line item in that area, for example, such as recreation, and another commissioner has a question on that particular line item as well, let's get those questions out of the way so we don't, for example, do Vice Mayor Lunt, and then when we get around to Commissioner Kulyas, he's got a question on that same line item as well, so we can see if we can expedite this process. So let's get started. City Manager LaCourse, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Okay. Again, this is the first start. Where we don't have any presentations to give you. We're ready here to answer questions, as the mayor said. So Paul's available and available for any questions on the many areas that he has under his control.
If I may just start with a few comments. Paul Smith, Public Services Director, thank you. I want to mention my leadership teams here tonight from various divisions, provide any other background information if we need that. And also the sustainability budget is a brand new budget proposed for fiscal year 23, and you'll notice it's not listed under the Public Services divisions, but it is one of our functions, and Sustainability Coordinator Robin Reeves is here as well tonight to answer any questions on that brand new budget proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Let's start. Can we get started now?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lunt, do you have any questions?
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Carr.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Paul. At one point, you were working on some type of solar panel program for the whole city. I know there's some additional solar panels going in out at the water plant, which is great to see. Has there been any other progress with the solar panels for other buildings like City Hall or the library or the gym or the public safety building?
That's a project that I've been talking to both project administration, Bob Robertson, and Public Works, Tom Funchen, about. I think it's going to take a team effort, probably with the inclusion of building development as well, or building department, to make sure that what we propose is actually going to be feasible. We've spoken with procurement on the best way to do it. I've also talked to some other cities. So we've done a lot of groundwork to try to get this project planned out and proposed, but that's about the extent of the progress so far.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Does any other commissioner have a question on that item? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Carr. Is that all you have?
Yeah, I don't have
Okay.
any questions right now.
Commissioner Eisner.
I'm good.
Commissioner Kulyas. Go ahead, and I'll get back to you, Commissioner Carr. Go ahead.
No comment.
Commissioner Carr.
I see sewage collection, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of trash collection. That's under Tom Funchkin, right, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, all right, never mind.
Okay. The only thing that I'm gonna, and I haven't seen it yet, as far as the golf course, if we can still get that list of, and you may already be working on this, the list of improvements that from, remember we talked about A to Z as far as what the golf course would like to do over, let's say, a 5 or 10-year period, to actually program those out so we can include them in some kind of a planning document for programming.
Yes.
That's the only thing that I'd like to see, maybe in the future. Of course, that's part of capital projects, but I wanted to say that now since we've got our golf course manager here. That's all I have on
Mayor?
Commissioner Eisner.
Yes, thank you. Are you leaving now? Just curious, or no, you're gonna stay for the whole? Okay, because I do have questions, but it pertains to everybody, so I just was, thank you, appreciate it.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
everybody else, but he's gonna be around for item 2 and 3. Most of the other departments, after they're up there, they'll be leaving, but Paul will be staying with us.
Do you want to get your comments out of the way now?
I could.
I mean, is that all right, City Manager LaCourse? Yeah,
sure,
go ahead.
sure.
Well, one of the things that I did was I crunched some numbers, and they don't add up. Not yours per se, but it just seems that we have more requests for needs versus the funds that we have. So I kind of gave, as I spoke with City Manager earlier, some of the ideas that we could come up with, and this is just for everybody. Unless we could find a way to have more funds, we would need to either reduce or stall some of the projects, which is something that we would have to decide. We would have to put a bond out there to pay for it. We would have to, another choice is to add to our millage rate, which I'm sure everybody will be very happy to do. And the other thing that I looked at was cutting everybody, and not us making the decision, but the department heads making the decision, because I don't know where you can sharpen your pencil and where you can't. But I know as it sits right now, I had an issue where, I don't know how the other commissioners looked it over, but there's, from what I saw, at least from the numbers that I got, which I later found out were not 100%, but we were off by about $8 million. So I don't know how to make that up. So I just wanted you to know that one of those choices has to be done. We just don't print money, so.
Is this for capital projects or operating funds?
It wasn't for operating, it was for capital, yes.
Okay.
And a lot of that's in item 2, in number 2 on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
A lot of that stuff that we're talking about and those alternatives was for
Yeah,
item 2.
that's, we always have more projects than we have money, and one of the issues has been we haven't really associated a year, an out year, a program year, an estimated date of when we would begin construction, even if it's beyond the 5-year horizon.
Sure.
And I think that's what the city manager's going to talk about. So it's something that I think from my perspective, we should have been doing a long time ago, but we're going to start doing it now, so.
Well, to balance the budget, that's what we would have to do. It's just, I'm not a kick the can down the road type
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
you know, so.
Okay. Anything else on that?
No, I'm good,
Okay.
thank you.
You want to go on to the next one?
Yeah. Is that it for Paul and all of
Mayor.
Paul's people?
I think that.
Mayor,
Commission-
I
Yes.
just wanted to ask about,
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Paul, we've talked about before, even with Howard, do we have any direction or future plans for a new clubhouse for the golf course?
That's something we put together a proposal for ARPA rather quickly. And that was one of the projects that was put forward as a possibility, as you know, and we'll talk about it more in item 2. It's very oversubscribed at this point. So we're going to continue, at least we've got some ideas, we've got a concept, but we've got to come up with a way to pay for it. If the ARPA funding isn't going to be available for that, you know, rough numbers, $1.5 million, probably something in that range. It's a big project. Then we're looking at, handling our debt first. The good news on the whole thing is the golf course is doing historically well. I mean, we're already past our whole fiscal year's revenue, and at the end of May, we already passed it up, our projections. So we're doing way better than expected, and we hope that trend continues. That'll allow us to pay things down sooner, and then start getting into this 5-year plan, as the mayor mentioned, making improvements that we need to make, including addressing that clubhouse.
Cool. Because golf courses are hard to run, so we are turning a profit with, that's
Yes,
awesome.
yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
That's it for all of
Okay, Paul and his
concerns.
people, thank you. Thank you very much. You did a great job on your budgets, so thank you. Janina in her one budget. We tried to, we had a department head with a whole lot of budgets, so we tried to temper it with Janina, who just has procurement.
Good evening.
You're there to answer questions, is that correct?
I am. I'm ready.
All right. Vice Mayor Lunt.
No, I don't have anything.
Commissioner Carr?
Fast.
Questions?
Commissioner Eisner? You're doing an excellent job, Janina.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kulyas?
Thank you.
No questions.
All I'm going to say is that I know it's it's a challenging time. Many of our projects, our RFPs are coming back a lot higher than what our budget estimates are, or cost estimates are. So we realize it's not your fault. I don't need to say that, but I understand it's a challenging time too. So the other issue is, of course, unexpected situations with contractors deciding to bail out on us, like the Gross Avenue thing. So I'm mentioning these primarily for the residents that are watching, to recognize that a lot of these things are beyond our control, and we don't have a crystal ball to expect these things, and they are coming back higher than what we expected. And I think you do an excellent job. So,
Thank you.
Actually,
Appreciate it.
I do have a question.
Vice Mayor Lunt.
Catch-up time. We do a lot of our procuring by piggybacking onto other entities' contracts.
Some, yes, yes.
How do you keep track of that?
The departments are responsible for their individual contract management, and then we do like a spreadsheet of the overall contracts that are on a term. So every year we know what's coming due. We check the balances. We make sure that the departments are keeping in line with what needs to be renewed.
And how do you keep, okay, so you buy item A and it's off contract from, I don't know, City of Largo, say, for example. How do you know that contract exists?
On the spreadsheet, we mark the dates. So we have a master spreadsheet that we keep in our office for everyone. And then basically it has the beginning date, the end date, and then we issue if it's a blanket purchase order, we'll issue the blanket purchase order, and it will also have the expiration date with the amount. So we know when each one is due, that they're within the time frame.
I think he's trying to get at, how do you know that all these
Yeah,
are
how
available?
do you-
Like
yeah.
all over the state, all these piggybacks, the availability, how do you come and work with the departments to find the contract somewhere else? That's it.
Oh, okay. So we have several avenues. Excuse me. One of our main ones is the Tampa Bay Cooperative. So they really do a lot of bids that we are included on as the city of Tarpon Springs. And we give them our estimates every year, so that's one way we find contracts. Am I going down the right avenue?
Yeah,
for
that's
you?
the right way.
Okay, so that's one way we get, a majority of our contracts are local, like Pinellas County, City of Clearwater, the Tampa Bay Cooperative. We use a lot of those. We also look within the state of Florida, such as a few of the chemical contracts, because the pricing is much better. Then there's the national contracts. So there are several national cooperatives out there. We have one called Omnia, we have the Sourcewell, we have the Sheriff's Association contracts. So when someone comes to us and they want to use one of these contracts, our first thing is to look up the contract, make sure it's still valid. We check all the bid procedures, the bid tabs. We get all the information that we can to try and make sure everything is good to go with using that contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Good question. Anything else from Ms. Lewis? Go ahead, Paniot.
Hey, Ms. Lewis, I was looking at the payroll projections, and I see there is one vacant spot for your department. How long has that spot been vacant for?
That spot has been open since December.
Okay, and are there some advertisements out looking to fill it?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, we advertise, we have the city advertisement, then there's the State of Florida Jobs Board, and then we also use our own internal contracting sites, which is the Florida Organization Purchasing Procurement, and then we use the national as well.
Okay, so it's basically two of you doing three people's jobs out.
Correct.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
That's it.
Thank you.
Jane Niffen, be coming up for Human Resources and Youth Employment Program.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Commissioners. I'm here to answer any questions you may have regarding Human Resources and the Youth Employment Program.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Niffen. Vice Mayor Lunt,
I have no questions at all.
Commissioner Carr.
Two questions. Can you touch base further on what the youth employment program actually is?
Well, we haven't been running it for the last couple of years due to COVID, but it was initially started targeting Tarpon Springs High School students who were going to go into grade 12 in the fall. So we would send out the applications for people, students to fill in. The police department was very helpful with their SROs and getting applications back. Department heads were able to have jobs that they needed filled. For example, IT, I think building developments had them, various departments, and they come in and they work for approximately 8 weeks in the summertime.
Okay, so it's like an internship basically, right?
Yes,
Okay,
except it's paid.
yeah, well, a paid internship, yeah.
Hang on, is there anybody else that's got a question on that?
No, I have one on the page 33, just
Then
HR.
Commissioner, we'll do that one later. Commissioner Carr, go ahead, proceed.
Yeah, I mean, it pays more than what I'm making, so can I apply for it? The other question is pertaining to liability insurance and property and casualty. We talked about that. I think that was going out to bid at some point.
Yes.
Can you give me an update on that, please?
We're currently working through that right now.
Okay.
And we should have a report, should have some conclusions, hopefully before we have to renew in October.
Great, okay. So some bids went out then, am I understanding that
They're
correctly?
about to go out.
Okay, great.
Anybody else on insurance or, okay,
That's it for me.
thank you. Commissioner Eisner,
Nothing.
Commissioner Kulyas.
Hey, ma'am, I was looking, do you have a number of like open city positions for the city overall?
We keep a list, but basically we do it through our job postings.
Okay.
All the job postings that we have will be on our website.
Okay, yeah, the only thing I wanted to ask about was line 49. It said recruitment for job openings, advertising, $1,500. Is that enough? Should we need more, you think?
We can always use more, but what happens when we run out of money, we hit the departments for the excess. And most of them have professional, for example, if it's a profession, they have professional memberships to organizations, and they can get some of those posted for free.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Does anybody else have a question on that? There is that's the one thing, I went through the Budget Advisory Committee recommendations, and they were given a list. It's a little dated right now as far as openings and things of that nature and where we were in the hiring process. And it may be a good thing if, I would assume you've got a plan of updating that and then providing that to the commission as well.
Yes, and tomorrow I was going to tell you, as I talked to you today, we need to update. We gave that list to Budget Advisory, but I know I've been signing, we've been finding some people to hire. I've been signing the hiring thing, so we'll get it updated up to now, a new one, and we'll send it to all the commissioners of where we are with open positions.
The reason why that's important is that there's quite a bit of money that's been budgeted but these positions have been open. So at the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, there may or may not be some money from that would be rolled over into this current budget, which would be available for some of the other things as well. So that's a good question. Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
to
Commissioner
piggyback off that one, I mean, city manager, are we going to be able to see that number at the end of the year, what wasn't allocated to salaries that was budgeted, that's going to be rolling over? Is that something you'll have for us?
Yes, it's a little bit, Ron, when's your usual time frame to have that number? They're talking about the number of money that we have to roll over, that, for instance, from the open positions and,
Yes, we can have that. In fact, I've got a list now. I think I need to update. I last updated about a week and a half ago. There's about 25 open positions that we have through our payroll budgeting module, but I can update it more
yeah,
recently.
not only that, but the list also, along with that, there are other things that we have overage, but it's usually like a good 3 or 4 weeks before you have that tabulated. Of
Correct.
the money that's left in this budget.
After the end of the
that could
fiscal
be
year.
used for one of the when we get into all these projects and fundings, and we're hoping some of the things that are not funded, there'll be some extra money there that could possibly add some projects to it. When do you usually have that, towards the end of October or?
November?
Probably the first part of November.
Yeah, I know it's not October 1. It takes you a while to, all the bills to come in and accumulate and stuff, so.
Thanks.
We do that through a budget resolution, is that?
Yeah, we do have a budget, and you'll, when I talk a little bit later, I'll give my speech about budget is 365 days a year. This budget is always fluid and moving, and you have opportunities to do things throughout the budget. You have opportunities to change priorities if things come up, so it's always a fluid document, but it's good for us to set the course in the budget time and stuff. So that's another source where we have something that we're not able to fund when it comes to October 1, that may be additional resource, that we come back and look at that list of the top things we didn't get to and plug those in and get those extra projects done for that year. Instead of waiting till next year to budget them, we can get to them this year.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Niffen? Okay, Mr. LaCourse.
Thank you, Jane. We have Fire Department, and Chief Meisner is going to be presenting, taking Chief Young's place tonight. So,
Hi, Deputy Chief
he is
Meisner.
available and knows everything about the budget back and forth.
Okay, Vice Mayor Lunt.
Actually, no, I'm good. I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Carr.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Craig.
Yeah.
With the additional calls going out of Station 6-9, do you feel like you need more staff there to help with that? I know there's some applications out for Safer Grant and some other things with the county. Do you think we could get along until those come along in the next year, or?
Yeah, the majority reason for the Safer Grant and the staff is to try and get the rescue unit staffed. So we have 2 ALS units running out of that station because the volume has gotten to a point where that's going to be a need. But I think we'll wait and see how that goes, because we have both the Safer Grant out, and then we've been working with the county as well.
Tell them a little bit about the county and the opportunity, which is why when I gave you the list of positions, I said the police were on it because the fire has a good chance. We're very close with numbers for the county to fund more. Could you tell them a little bit about that? Because that's important in where we were talking about positions and the great opportunity of us being real close to getting county-funded positions to add to it.
So by the county's contract with the first responders, in order to get funding for what they call FTEs, which are staffing, for a rescue unit, we need to be averaging 10 calls per shift per day out of that one station. And right now, last year we averaged about 9 calls, just about 9 calls. And this year, right now, we're currently somewhere averaging, so far this year, around 11, a little over 11 calls. So, of course, it's obviously in arrears when the county does that, so they'll be looking at this upcoming years through January for that number. So when they're doing their budget for next year, hopefully we'll fit those volume, and that will qualify us for that extra staffing from the county. And they would staff, basically, it's 3 more medic positions and and a little extra for the backfill for vacation days and things like that. So it would be, it would be 1 full FTE, A, B, and C shift. So it's 3 medics is what that would end up being. So that would be enough for us to staff the rescue full-time and keep our fire staffing on our suppression units the same, which is what we want.
Okay. That'll be in fiscal year 2024?
Correct. Hopefully.
23, 24.
23, 24, right, yeah.
So, do we go to the county now and tell them the numbers to see if we can get anything sooner?
We did. We went this year during the budget process, and we didn't qualify because it was last year's numbers, so it was 9 calls per shift.
Okay.
A little under, but this year's been busier, so if we going by this year's numbers, up to date, year to date. Of course, if for some reason it were to slow down, but it doesn't look that way.
And can you get me some of those numbers? I would like to connect with, or Mark, I would like to connect with our county commissions about that.
Sure.
Try to push that along further to make sure that's funded next year, and maybe if they could do it earlier.
Yeah, so the county did fund us, just so we know, they did fund us for the actual rescue unit
Okay.
this year, just not the staffing for it.
Okay.
So they gave us the metal, but not the people for it. So I think that was under the assumption that they kind of know where this is heading.
Got it. So are we in the process of trying to acquire this vehicle?
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Chief Walsh, that's it would be in this upcoming budget.
Great, okay. Any issues with response times? I know there's requirements across the board for the city to be there within certain minutes. Do we have any issues with that? with the
Yeah,
current
so
staff
our
level?
response times are pretty good. We average between 4.5 and 5 minutes on our normal response times when they're in station. So
Okay.
the biggest problem with response times in our area is purely based on if one of our units is out on a call, it's the concurrent call that comes in. So with our response times, it's usually a concurrency issue for our area because we have 1 unit running out of each station. So when 6-9 runs a call and another call comes into 6-9's area, for Station 70 to come up to 6-9's area, Station 71 to come up, they generally won't make that first response call. But we're seeing better times with the new system with AVL, which is the GPS location closest unit response. So we run into Eastlake, Palm Harbor runs into our area based on if we're driving through Palm Harbor, we could get banged down on a Palm Harbor call because it's done by GPS. So it's just closest available unit that can respond to an emergency
Okay.
throughout the county. So
I have a question along that line. Does anybody else have a question on that line, on what we're talking about right now? So I guess the bottom line is a couple of things. One, you don't hire the people ahead of time because then they wouldn't reimburse us for that, and it wouldn't make sense to hire people until we've got the metal in place, and we don't have that yet. Is that correct, or am I wrong about that?
yeah, so obviously they won't fund the people, and so we wouldn't hire them unless we knew we had the approval for the funding for that medic unit, unless, obviously unless the city made a decision.
And what's the timing on these vehicles? I know the big trucks are way out. What is the timing on these vehicles?
Yeah, so the rescue unit's probably a year and a half to build.
So that's
It's
why
just
the
you
people
order
come
them
just in
now,
time
but
to hit the unit.
it'll probably, if we get the people, then by the time we hire them, the metal will actually be here physically.
Okay.
So,
Could you use the people without having the metal here?
no, we can always use the people.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got one more question, I'm sorry.
Go
The
ahead.
SAFER grant, so that's out for application right now. When do we expect to hear back on that?
Well, last time we did the SAFER grant, and when we received it, it was sometime in late September that we heard that we got, I think, September, October, so it depends. That's a FEMA, related, so you're waiting on the federal government, so we say September, but I don't, it can be anywhere. It's closed now, so that means they're reviewing all of the applications.
And how many FTEs is that you applied for?
That would be for 3 people.
3? Okay.
That Safer Grant is just like the time we had before, it's percentages, so they would pay for a percentage of 75% for the first year, and then it drops in the second year, and then it drops down the third year, and then the city would be responsible for maintaining those levels after that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Is that it, Commissioner Carr?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Eisner.
How did the water and sewer service get up so high on a change?
I'm not exactly sure. We don't set that. You know, that's usually set from, Ron, do you know the water and sewage on our?
Yeah, that's part of the, that's the Ron. Some of these budgets, certain items are a Ron portion of it, so this would be a Ron portion.
Yeah, we've been looking at the history of it. In fact, I asked Scott and his staff to look into it because we did see an increase in our water and sewer, so we are looking at it to see what's going on with why it increased so much. But usually we do it based on the averages for the past 3 years and what's going on the current year when we're looking at it. But we did see a spike up in it, so we're trying to look into it, see what's going on there. I know one time this happened a few years ago, and there was the irrigation system out there, so we're looking into it.
Yeah, because the last 3 years, you have 64, 64, 62, and now you're estimating 70, so that's a large jump.
Yeah.
Okay. Same thing I would ask about the electrical as well, because I don't know, did that electrical go up as much as, you know, these are, I just have like 3 or 4 things here. How did the electrical go up almost $5,000?
Yeah, the same thing with the electrical, and we're just going by the historicals there and what the current year and the increase on that there.
It just looks like it's a large jump because, yeah.
Are we talking about the public safety building, or?
Allocated for the fire department in line, or page 64.
It's, yes, it's on page 64.
I think, Commissioner Eisner, if you look, there's the top rows, there's the original budget, the revised budget, and the actual year-to-date. And I think the year-to-date, between the year-to-date and the proposed budget for '23 could look larger because we still have June, July, August, September, 4 months left in this year's budget. So that's why it could look even higher, because I call them year-to-date in there.
I know the one thing that may be a factor that we're not thinking about here is maybe the chiller at the public safety. The chiller, the air conditioning, needs to be replaced, and when that thing's not running efficiently, I know that's just a thought, so.
Well, and the other thing is we try to get in contact with Duke Energy, and they were projecting some rate increases. Sometimes they go up, they go down, but they've been projecting some rate increases on the electric.
Yeah.
What is a interdepartment allocation?
I was wondering if somebody would ask about that.
Ready for that one.
Well, what that is, what we do, we get money from the county for both. You'll see it in the library and the fire department. So mostly what it is, it's administrative charges like for finance. What does finance do for the fire department? So we're allocating those charges. You'll see a credit in the finance department, but you'll see a charge going into the fire department. Basically, we're allowed to put those charges into the fire department and the library department, and it increases the reimbursement that we will get from the county for the finance department services, procurement, IT, building maintenance, parks, if they're maintaining the yards there. So our way of handling it is to charge the fire and library departments for those. We charge those departments and then credit the other departments within the city. That makes sense.
Partially, but then I will ask you, how did it change by almost $9,000? That's another thing that just,
What we saw with the fire department, the number of purchase orders that they did and other things through the purchasing department decreased, so that decreased the allocation for the fire department.
doesn't explain it to me, but I'll run with it. It just doesn't make sense to me, that's all. I'm looking at the numbers straight across on all the years, and on that one, it's just, I think you're just estimating a lot on it, that's all.
Well, we're going back, like I say, for each item. For HR, we're using the number of employees, fire department versus total city, purchase orders for purchasing. It's the number of purchase orders that the fire department use as a comparison, as a total of the total city.
And I think this is a good point where I can make one of the speeches I'm gonna make at the end. Obviously, in one night, we can't, this is a good example from each of you. When we're in budget time, in these budget meetings, we still have a lot of time to September and the public hearings and stuff. We open ourselves up, Ron, and the departments for additional questions or big, there'll be many items you get to otherwise that need some explanation to. And all of you are available to set up times, and we'll go over that. In fact, all interdepartmental allocation stuff would be a good item to sit down and go through. So any commissioner, this is not the end, Paul Smith and everybody sitting down and you had one crack at it and stuff. You've got plenty of time to look through and find other things, and then the departments are open to sit down and meet with you and get you the rest of the answers. This is not your only chance to get answers. We got 2 more months to get answers before the budget's finished and stuff. So I just wanted, that's one of the things I'll say at the end on these things, and some of these things, believe me, I have to be explained 2, 3, or 4 times with accounting and stuff to understand. So these are good things to set up meetings and sit down, and I'm making everybody available for the whole duration of the budget. I'm for that, and that'd be a good place to do that with for any of you who want to talk about certain things like that. That's real in detailed.
I have nothing further on that topic.
Anything else for, go ahead, Commissioner Kulyas.
Yes, as Commissioner Carr brought up, is the response time from the Palm Harbor Station that comes and services Klosterman Road and Carlton good?
Yeah, so Palm Harbor's 6-7, Station 6-7, to certain areas off of Klosterman Road, they will, because of AVL, their GPS is actually located closer than 6-9 traveling up 19, then down Klosterman. They can come right up basically Belcher Road and right across Diston into certain areas of Oakley Village. They will get there generally a little bit faster than 6-9 will, but we're talking about, like a 30-second difference or so. But ABL is set for that, so they do it that way. It's just closest unit now, so as long as everything's working properly.
Okay. What station is the Gulf Road station?
Station 70.
Okay. Are we putting a lot of improvements into it this year?
So we have it in our list of possibilities, but hopefully at some point we were discussing a new station at some point. So we won't want to throw a whole lot of money.
That's why you see that in the not funded yet list. If for some reason when we get to the next part and we decide to move move the fire station, if we were to move the fire station down in years, like move it back a couple of years or space it that way, then we would need to do some improvements to those things would need to be brought forward and funded because we need to improve. So if we're not looking at the next 3 or so years of getting a fire station, then there'd be some things we need to do now with it. So a lot's going to depend on where the building of the new fire station comes in your budgeting. But that's why you see items that are still on the not funded list.
Yes.
Because they may need to be funded depending on the years we space out when the fire station is going to be built.
Okay. This question may be for Ron, as we were talking about the payroll projections. I noticed for fire chief, there was a retirement contribution, and we had discussed that it should be a 0 number, and I'd like to see it recorrected or redistributed among the
Yeah, Ron, you want to come
firefighters.
up and talk about that so everybody knows the...
Well, our practice through our payroll budget module has been to budget, you're talking about the retirement.
Yes.
We're funding what the actuary tells us we need to fund for the fire and police pension union contracts. Our practice has been just to fund through the position title, what the position is, and fund the amounts. It's not that they're getting that pension. The actuary tells us how much is the city's contribution required. Fire might be about $850,000. So we just have gone across the payroll program and allocated across the different positions on there.
Okay. Thank you.
If it's so be it, if you want to, we can take that out. It will just, that balance there would just be moved and it's spread across the other union employees.
Yeah, we need to do that for looks' sake. We need to do that.
Well, other fiscal years, it was 0, so that's why I wanted to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Commissioner Eisner.
So going back to what Commissioner Cooley said regarding that firehouse, can we have a listing of what is needed to maintain what's presently there and how much it'll cost to kind of do an upgrade versus the price of replacement? So that we have a way to justify whether it's a go or no?
Yeah, what we have now is in the list that you have that I gave you on things that my cut list. I don't know what Ron titled it when we gave it to you last time, but it's things that were in the budget but are not funded because I took it out of the budget. We have those there, and we'll put those together with anything else we maybe anticipate. That would be this year's that we would do, but there may be something next year and the year after. So we'd look at those things that we need to do over a couple. We'll add to those numbers that you already have and do one thing of what improvements we need in those 3 years if it was to refurbish and keep that going until we did a new one later to let you look at.
Because that is a hefty amount of money in the ARPA funds. So, and when we're short,
We'll give you a full individual out of that whole long list of these department heads know there's a long list of the city managers cut to unfunded in there and stuff, but we'll move that into one thing for the fire station, anticipate and get that to you.
And that fire station, does it fall under this budget, or does it fall under
Depends.
Public Works budget? Who maintains the building, the fire station building?
It's budget, it ends up, Ron, where do you end up budgeting those improvements that were on the, I know we cut it from the fire, but is it actually funded out of Public Works though?
For the improvements to like Station 70 that they're talking
Ones
about?
that we have on the cut list.
Yeah, it's about $230,000 worth of stuff that's in the cut list, but we would be budgeting it out, mostly out of the penny fund.
In what department? Just out of the penny fund you'd be putting it?
Yeah, yeah. Capital improvements out of the penny fund.
that's 230 versus the 5-something for new?
Well, that's not complete remodel, that's the repairs we'd have to do that we need to be doing, that's repairs we'd be needing to do.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Like, I forget the list, you don't have that, I know you got that budget memory. What were the things on that list, like flooring, some flooring?
Apparatus bay floor and ramp, $145,000. Repair, replace soffit, fascia, gutters, $25,000. Drywall repairs, $30,000, and painting of the building, another $30,000.
So it's not a remodel, it's just the repair work that if we're building a new station stuff, we might not necessarily do.
I'm sorry, but it sounds to me like those kind of repairs need to be done anyway, because I don't think even if we decide by the time the budget's here that we're gonna build a new building, it's gonna take considerable time to let it out to bid, to get it built, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they have to live in this station for maybe the next year, 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah, and that may be true, and that's where some of those other funds that we talked about may become available that we might do during that time. But there'd be more extensive ones that would have, I think what would be more extensive ones if it was put back, that would be another list to go on to these, of extensive, if we weren't even gonna start for 3 years, there might be some items besides these just normal ones that we can do and move in. These would just be ones to plug in, with money. If you were looking at what do we need to do, I think Commissioner's question, if we're just gonna remodel for now and push the fire station down the road,
Correct.
it would obviously be more of these things. These are just some generic things. It would be, that's why I wanna go back and look at what actual bigger ticket items to go to give you a full picture of what we need, if you need that for the item we get to in 2.
Well, you're comparing that to $6.5 million, so, yep, okay.
On the station, the station's coming up on it, it's gonna be close to almost 50 years old. You know, so, and there is county things as well that they do start talking about it at that 50-year mark is that when they want those stations, you know, upgraded. So just to keep that in mind, each time we move the station back further, you're increasing the cost of how much it's gonna cost to build that station too. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We're part of the county's emergency management services, so we're not completely independent of their influence. And I know my next door neighbor, Tommy Thompson, is who the building is named after. He's a great guy. But the one thing, it doesn't even come close to meeting the current building codes for wind loads and protection. And the one issue is if we do have a storm and maybe the newer homes are fine and everything, and that firehouse is damaged to the extent that it can't be used, then we're really in a bad situation. So I'm not crying wolf or anything like that, but that's something to think about as well, just the overall protective level as far as the storms go.
And the important thing is that is the recovery for the west side of town.
That is
If we have a
recovery, yeah.
bad storm, that building would be the recovery building. And again,
And currently, we evacuate
Yeah.
that building during a storm. They come up to 6-9.
I
So
guess
they can't
we'll
be in that
be
station.
we'll be getting more into this in the capital side of it.
yes.
So,
Go ahead.
is this construction estimate for the new station on Gulf Road that we're talking about?
Yes.
Is it, I mean, you came up with the figures because it's gonna be similar to what's on North Anclote, or how did you come up with the figures for this?
Yeah, so it would be on the same basic premise of the one that's on the new station, Station 71, the newest station.
Is that gonna be
It's on the basis of that, but of course, there are increased costs of, that was quite a few years ago.
Is that gonna be sufficient for your operations?
Yeah, so that, it would be similar, just wouldn't have in theory, we wouldn't have the training tower there. It would be just the station part of it. So you would take that out. You wouldn't need the training tower because we have that at 71. So it would be the station, and we would be increasing the size of the bay to 3 bays instead of the 2 small bays that we have there. So we would be able to have our marine unit there, the dive unit, so those things that
Is that
right now we're
lot
starting.
big enough?
I assume it is. They did all that work on the front side with Bob Robertson for the side, putting Station 71 on that
And
spot.
next to it,
Oh, okay.
between that station
I know
and
where it
Jimmy.
is, yeah. Anyway, thanks.
Are there any other yes, Commissioner
I have
Perez.
questions.
And this may be a question for Ron. The 5% city increase for city employees, that did not apply to the fire department or the police department.
The 5% funding was for the general employees, but we do have the increases for the police and fire unions based on their union contracts is in the budget.
Okay, and that, their union contract is coming up, do you know when?
Well, 2023, this is, the budget you're working on would be the last year. So next year at this time, we'll probably be working on the union contracts for fiscal year 2023, 24.
Okay, and we had discussed this earlier. I was looking at the fire department pension contributions in the police department, and I noticed there was a lot more per person for the fire department. Can you give a little explanation on that?
Well, we get that number from the actuary, and from what we understand, a lot of unfunded liabilities within in the fire pension versus the police pension. That's why you're probably wondering why the fire pension is more than police pension. And from what I found out, I believe the fire pension one is going to go down a little bit this year. It's not in the budget right now. One of the unfunded liabilities, I think, was over 10 years, just expired, so it might be going down a little bit more.
Cool.
From the number that's in there.
Thank you, sir.
Just on that note, I want to just disclose to my fellow commissioners that we do have a request from the police union the police union president to discuss that aspect, that 5%, as it's tied to the contracts. And she's asked to meet with the city manager, myself, and the police chief next week sometime. So we'll let you know what's going on with that. City manager will, I won't. So in any case, I just want to let y'all know that there is a request coming from the PBA concerning the question you just asked.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions for the fire department?
Thank you. Police Department, and Jeff Young's up next.
Jeff Young, Police Chief, and I have Major Ruggiero and Raquel Hull here with me tonight to help answer any questions you all may have.
Vice Mayor Lunt,
I don't have any questions at this time, actually.
Commissioner Carr.
Yeah, I ask this question pretty much every year. Overtime's budgeted close to $500,000. If you had additional positions, would that help in any regard if you had, I guess, strategic staffing, right? Because you know you're going to have call-outs and vacation, things like that, but I understand that you do have, based on Chief Cochin tell me, you have overtime regardless when you have court cases come up and things like that, or other things along
Correct,
those
and we
lines.
can't anticipate crimes. You know, there could be large call-outs that we have involving, you know, a triple homicide that puts a lot of stress on the department and overtime. And could it have a positive effect? Absolutely, with short shifts and things of that nature. Certain items that we can control with personnel staffing. But you have a hurricane, and we're working 24 hours a day, you know, for 3 days. If it comes closer, then our overtime budget is going to be tenfold, as well as the fire departments during any situation like that.
That's like a special occasion though, right?
Absolutely, the hurricane season and such, but any other incident, you know, could happen. We have, you know, numerous incidents that may happen throughout a year that'd be taxing on the overtime that we can't control. But I do think that staffing has a positive effect on short shifts, even court coverage and stuff. You know, having a ratio of officers available. There's a certain level that we like to maintain, and if we have to call in officers, we will to cover the shift for that. So, and I think that would have a positive effect on that.
Okay, so if the board felt it was necessary to add a couple police positions or officers positions, that you think it could be a benefit to the overtime then, potentially?
Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Eisner.
I have just, it's a bit of a strange question, but that's been known to come out of my mouth before. Is there any routine for, I traveled with the officer, for why, I mean, the fuel charges are extremely high. We all know it's doubled. Is there any reason, particular reason why we leave the vehicles running all the time? And I know it's response time and whatnot. Is there any adverse effect of shutting them off?
Well, when they come to the station, if they're going to be there for a long time, they're required to shut their vehicles down. If they're going to be going out on a call for service, out on a traffic stop or something, they need to leave that vehicle running in case they need to move it or anything else. Plus, their electronic equipment that's in the car, the computer
have to all be
systems and everything
restarted,
else
yeah.
out there. The heat index gets raised in that car. That jeopardizes what they're putting into the computer program at that time. So those things are things that we look at too. But, you know, obviously fuel cost is a concern everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just see it's your largest increase on there, and
I look at the monthly fuel cost, and just the fuel cost over, you know, from beginning of this year, 15,000 up to 29,000. The last one, fuel cost, period, not consumption, just the cost of a gallon. And I think that is felt by everybody in society.
could there be, and then I'm just throwing this out there, when the weather cools down, is it a different issue?
As far as,
Shutting it off then, because the heat index is not there anymore?
you know, again, still, the inside the vehicle still gets hot. It'll all depend on what they're doing, but we look to ways to mitigate that.
Okay. That's all I really had, because everything else on here is just a given, you know, it is what it is, and there's nothing really you can do with it. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kuyas.
Yes, Mayor, I did want to follow up with Commissioner Carr and the overtime wages. The thing with the overtime wages, that those officers and the way we're staffed right now, they sort of need them. They keep their salaries up. There's other nearby municipalities where, you know, the pay may be the same, but they're getting more overtime hours, so where they're, you know, their salary at the end of the year is up. So that is a benefit to the police department. I did want to follow up with the line 15, off-duty assignments for special events around the city. Now, is that usually special events that private companies or citizens pay for?
That's correct, but we have to pay the officers
that
Absolutely.
week, and then we'll be getting that money in the rears, and Ron will do a budget transfer for that money, but we have to have a line item in there to cover the pay.
Okay, and I've reached out with the city manager in the future when PBA discussions talk about and getting maybe a 5% increase for evening shifts or a 10% increase for graveyard shifts, so in the future for the officers. And then, see if I have, that's it, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. All I've got to say is that the special events, I get to talk to the police officers, and sometimes they're doing double shifts, and it's a little surprise to them because of the need. So I know there's tremendous flexibility in our police department. They all have a can-do spirit. They come through there, smile, and whatever's tossed at them, they handle it exceptionally well. So I very much appreciate that.
I appreciate everything they do every day, especially, you don't know what call they were just at before they came smiling with you, because they were probably crying with somebody else before that, so.
Yeah, okay. City Manager.
That's it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Suzanne and IT.
Good evening, how are you?
She's ready to answer any questions that you have on IT.
Vice Mayor Lund.
Actually, this looks pretty good to me, and I had a long conversation with her today, so I'm good for right now, unless somebody else brings up something that gets my attention.
Commissioner Carr.
How's that cybersecurity personnel going from last year through this year?
Very, very good. Actually, one of our line items in the budget increase this year is for the SIM, which is the Security Information and Event Management System, and that was one of the recommendations by our new cybersecurity engineer. That is a logging system where we take all of the logs from all of the servers, the firewalls together, and it's easier for us to navigate all of the information that's coming in. So it's going very, very well. We are very satisfied with our position with cybersecurity, and everything is going fantastic.
Great. Are you still pulling phone lines and Cat 5 lines to the building yourself?
As needed, but we are voice over IP now, so we do still pull cable when we need to.
I caught her one day pulling Cat 5 lines herself.
Yes, you did.
So she gets her hands dirty.
I do. I crawl
there,
all
so.
over the place.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Commissioner Eisner.
I have the same question I had before, the interdepartment allocation.
Yes, and I can speak a little to that. My interdepartment allocation is from the library, and last year the library had 70 computers, and I worked with Carrie Rupp-Calvis, the director there, and we were able to get that figure down to 50 computers this year. So that is why my interdepartment allocation from the library went down this year, because I'm only servicing 50 computers at the library instead of 70.
I didn't realize that you did that.
Yes, I manage all the computers in the whole city.
So the library pays you separately for
Correct.
your? Okay.
From the county, we get funds back, so that's the interdepartment allocation that they
Gotcha.
pay us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I should point out that the fire department, the way that Ron Herring described it, comes from Pinellas County Emergency Management, the reimbursement. For the library, it's the Pinellas County Library Cooperative that funds us. That's where there's a distinct, how do you get the library and the fire department? Well, they're two different county pots of money. Commissioner Kulyas.
Thank you, Mayor. Really one question on the line 52, the Adobe iPads at 29,000, that's just the Adobe software for the iPads?
No, it's Adobe/iPad. So
Okay.
Adobe went from having an on-prem solution, now it's all subscription-based. You can't have a PDF Adobe anymore, you have to pay for the subscription. So throughout the city, IT for all of the departments chose to manage that for them. So I manage all of the subscriptions for the entire city for the individuals.
Well, that sounds right if it's for the whole city.
It's really
absolutely.
fun, yeah.
And just, I was looking at, and this may be a question for Ron, on the payroll projections, some of these employees split up with pay in other departments, or is that their okay. I
Yes,
just
water
couldn't
sewer.
pick them apart.
Yes.
And
Commissioner Kulyas,
oh, and that's it. Thank you.
are there any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple of comments more than questions.
Sure.
I still need to go through the audit reports and stuff like that and have further conversations with you. I think we need to perhaps readdress zero tolerance policies. I don't believe that, I don't know when the last time you took a look at it from the aspect of the type of firewalls you look at right now. But if you take a look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant for firewalls, just out of reference, and I sort of know what kind of equipment you use, looks where it sits. I think we need to bring it up and to the right a little bit. So please keep that in mind the next time you sort of look at that area.
Sure, will do.
Ms. Linton, I still think that IT is one of those areas that people don't have a full appreciation of everything that you do. I mean, you've got people at the police department,
Yes.
you've got people here, you're managing things at the library, all over town.
Yes.
And of course, we've got 2 or 3 guys up there now working these meetings and along, as well as all the performances and everything else that goes on. So thank you for everything that you do, especially during COVID with all the Zoom meetings that we had. You held down the fort. Thank you.
That was a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
But you were ahead of the rest of the county when we put this thing out, so.
There were. We always are.
That's all I have. Thank you.
There's New York confidence there.
Yes, absolutely. I'm from New York. Thanks.
All right. Bringing up the rear, it would be finance.
Okay, Finance Department.
Vice Mayor Lunt, anything for Mr. Herring?
Can't turn pages fast enough here.
You know, I have just a general comment, and I've already sort of made this to Ron. We take a look at budgets like this, especially spreadsheets, and we look at the variance, but we're looking at the variance from the original budget from the previous year. Those budgets get massaged and changed and so forth and revised during the year. Personally, and you know, I'm not a finance person, so take this with a grain of salt. I really got a lot, I haven't finished sort of looking at what I was looking, but I think we also need to pay attention to the variance from what our revised budget was, because the revised budget is reality. The budget that we proposed a year ago was the budget that we proposed a year ago. So that's just my thought on the subject.
No, that's an excellent point, and a lot of people overlook that as well. The budget that we're doing that's going to be approved isn't going to be quite that way by the end of the fiscal year. And then for the future, I think it's especially appropriate with some of the areas, and Mr. Smith and I have had conversation about that, and starting out with really I don't want to call it good intention, but meaningful intention, but there's things that happen, things don't go as quickly and stuff like that, and then a lot of the projects the projects get encumbered, which they roll, and they haven't been completed, they roll over, or else we just don't quite get to that one, and that money rolls over to the future too. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I understand. It's just, for me, it was an interesting analysis. It wasn't that it showed any great disparities or anything, but there was some significant stuff it pointed out overall. So I just think it's a good idea to sort of look at that sometime. And I know it's probably not standard operating procedures, so my apologies for trying to tell you how to do your job.
Yeah, and I guess when you're talking about the revised budget, I think in the past, they've liked to compare the original ones. When you get the revised budget, you're getting all the projects, capital projects and encumbrances from the previous year are being carried over into the budget you were looking at is a 2022 budget. So that's why the main point of the difference is those outstanding items from 2021 being carried over to 2022.
Commissioner Carr. Commissioner Eisner.
Well, I am back at the interdepartment allocation again. I'm gonna go right back to that. But you're gonna say that it's a, I'll let you say what it is.
Well, and what I can do is I can provide you how we work it up each year for the different departments and stuff. And based on I think this one was mostly the fire department, their budget increased as a percentage, so the allocation to the the finance department increased. But like I said, I can give you the actual spreadsheet to show you how we calculate it up.
That's all I really have.
Mayor, can I add on that? Mayor?
You have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So year over year, over the past, I don't know, 5 years, I brought this up, is I can't remember what it's called. It's not the intercompany, what you're talking about, Commissioner Eisner, but it's something similar to where like the water department, the sanitation department, I can't remember what other departments are. The enterprise funds are actually putting money back into the city's general funds. Can you touch on that a little bit? I mean, I haven't been for that in the past. I'm still not for it because we pay taxes on our water bills to help cover HR and fleet and other things, but then we're also putting millions of dollars into the general fund.
Yeah, it's
from
a
these
standard
enterprise
government
funds.
accounting practice of allocating, since the water and sewer fund, stormwater fund, sanitation fund do not have administrative staff. All the work administratively is being done by the general fund. So what we do is we transfer, and what we've been doing is that one of the standards was when we did a survey for it, and we base it on 8% of the charges for services, the revenue amount. So each year we calculate, okay, what's 8% of the charges for services for water and sewer fund, and we make that the transfer going from the water and sewer fund to the general fund to help pay for the administrative staff work that's being done on a part of the water and sewer fund, sanitation fund, and stormwater fund. We don't do one for the golf course fund or the marina fund due to their financial constraints.
So it's ultimately an 8% admin fee for all enterprise funds, right?
Correct. That's our policy.
And with the golf course doing better, are they going to be looking at implementing that maybe New Year's again in the future?
I would like to wait until we get the negative balance eliminated and stuff. So.
Got it. All right. Again, I'm not in support of 8%, and it's something I've harped on over years past. I would like to see the general fund cover these positions fully and let the enterprise funds, if we need to reduce enterprise funds further, if it's reducing the water bill or something along those lines, we could do that. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Commissioner Kuyas.
A lot of my questions, I just want to focus on general employees and raises, and I appreciate the 5% across the board for the general employees, but is there a way we can, and hopefully I can get some support on this board, that some of the salaries on some departments and positions they're really low, and I wanted to see if there was a way to have a tiered system. Maybe top tier of employees may not necessarily make 5% increase, but there would be an average of a 5% increase, and some of the lower tiered people can be anywhere up to 6-7%. Right now inflation's just out the roof, You know, we're in that country about 9% inflation. We're automatically going to do a 3% increase just for, you know, cost of living. So that difference isn't much. And, you know, I know the executives work hard too, but I'm trying to look out for the little man. And I want to try to see if there's whether it be a tiered system or if everyone gets 5%, that, you know, the rank and file individual can get something more. I don't know if it'd be 7%, 8%, but, and I know it's going to be hard to try to make it work, but I would like to see some type of change this year towards that, as well as on-call. I see every department that the on-call is $75 each per week, and if we want to keep everyone working here, we got to have somewhat near competitive on-call rates and other benefits too, similar to other municipalities. And I would make a suggestion that we increase and we actually double that on-call to $150 per week. On-call means no life. You are waiting at the beck and call of the city at any point in time to make sure that something can get done for the resident. So just wanted to get some thoughts on that and see if we could come back maybe in the future with either a tiered system or making sure the, you know, rank and file lower level individual gets a higher percentage for this year, because it's out of control right now. We don't know what's going to happen anytime soon.
Would you put that in a memorandum?
Sure.
Yeah,
Well,
I
let me
mean,
answer.
And the city manager does have a partial answer for you.
Number two is, look out at the audience and look at Paul Smith trying to hide his smile. Go ahead, Paul, stop trying to hide it and stuff. He has been on a committee that I formed about on-call pay, and they've been working on, they have recommendations still to be incorporated in this budget, and you'll start seeing salary, some additional salary stuff, like all you're seeing now, but in August, we actually have to come to the board with changes in grades and positions. Individual positions are low. One of the things that you're gonna see in that aspect is they're at the point where they're ready to meet with me, and their numbers are probably, it looked like you did all the statistics they've been working on for 3 or 4 months, but you're probably consistent what we're doing. That end is coming, and that'll be and the reason we have to go to the board, not in budget, but to the board, because the board has to approve any position changes, things like that. But you're going to see that policy on the increase of call pay coming. And on the tiered, what I'll get for you and the rest of the commissioners, especially the new commissioners, we have been doing a tiered raise for probably the last at least 4 to 5 years, getting those lowered people up. We're at the point now, when you see that personal, which it's usually the second meeting of August, when we bring that to an actual board meeting and talk about the ranges and everything, you're going to see the last 5 years we've been doing, starting at 6, sometimes 7, but at least 6, 5, 4, and 3, going from the lower ones, and we've done that to get to the point where you're going to see this year. We were working on the goal that, I don't like these national goals or these goals people set, but the thing to get to $15 an hour by 2025 or whatever, we tiered all those tier raises to get there a couple years early, and we're going to achieve that this year and stuff. So I think we need to get to you to show you those tiers that we are doing, and right now we've got all those levels. That's why for the first time, this will be the first time in at least 5 years that it's an even across the board to try to move everybody, because we're also going to ask to move the ranges 5% also, just to keep up with the other people. This is one where we need to do everybody, because everybody's going to catch us in the county or stuff. So you're going to see this a lot more detailed when we actually come to you with the salary and some different positions we want to increase, and that you're going to be seeing that soon. It's usually not in these first 2 budget meetings, but it's when it comes to you. So you're going to be seeing all this coming up, and they're working on those kind of things right now that you mentioned to look at. They're already in the process of working.
That's awesome.
But if there's some other things, though, that's what I'm getting at. Just list all your thoughts then,
Yes.
and let the city manager address them. I think we used to call it the living wage. When I first came on board, it was called the living wage. I asked the exact same question, and there's a lot of things that go on here that we don't see as commissioners. So, okay.
Mayor?
Commissioner, were you done?
I'm done.
Commissioner Eisner?
I just wanted to share that I agree with Commissioner Cooley's what he just said, but I also wanted to add if we could put in on merit increase. So, just, and have it run more so by department head. If somebody's, really putting out that they should be in a position to move up the tier, just better than someone who's not. And that's, I'd like to see that go in as well.
I'll be glad to talk personally about that. There's real issues with that. We had that here before, and there was real, Irene, I'm sure, and any of the old timers can tell you the real problems with each department head and what they did to try to get a consistent pattern of who is meritorious and to get more and stuff. It was nightmarish, but we'll have an individual, that'll be a long sit down with you and talk to you about some of the.
Well, they would have to do it in a report style. I mean, they'd have to give you some
But
facts.
you can do that.
I'm well aware how you can do
That's
it.
easy to do if depending on the rating ability of the department heads who are unfortunately not on the same plane about what merit is and what it isn't and stuff, so.
I'm aware of the ramifications of the downfall of it as well, yes.
Okay.
That's a good question, though. Yeah. Commissioner Kulyas, you had another question?
Because Commissioner Eisner did bring up the merit base, and I've heard both sides of the situation, but if we could also potentially increase funding available for, and maybe incentivize, training, and, we want people to stay here. We don't want people to get trained and then take off a few months after. So I don't know if it's an incentive base or a pay increase, but, we want to do everything we can to, take care of our employees and give them the most incentive they can. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're going to get hit from both ends. One, retention, people moving on, because the county, as we had that one example already, an excellent employee going to the county, and then also the challenge of hiring people as well. That's, we're going to get hit at both ends. Okay, let's see. Was there anything else from Mr. Herron? Okay, thank you, Ron.
So Ron will stay, but I've got to, why don't you all move up to the front in case we need you. And really, Paul and Tom, they're covering Bob Robertson's on vacation. Hopefully, they're up to date to ask any questions on some of these specific things. But mainly, I want to continue from our conversation at the pre-budget workshop hearing and stuff. And what I had talked about, the different funds of money, the amount of money that's available, and where it's the duty of this board, not only for this year, but again, this board and this budget is unusual because usually the board does not have a lot of discretionary money to spread out, and some years it's been under 200,000 after you cover everything you have to cover. There's been very little money to the side on projects, and this budget and next year's budget is really going to set the course for the next 5 years, and that's where all those things where we're 8 million short of, that's where those need to be distributed, and this board will have the major role in distributing that money of the things we can't fund now, how we're going to slot them into different funding sources over the next year. What this big piece of paper, I think in the backup you had a little piece of paper, but Judy was able to make this bigger. This we got together with some other staff besides Paul and stuff. We all got together. And we want to give you a worksheet that if it was our decision from a staff level, and obviously you've got a lot of other, decision-making things you have to make as a commission, but we wanted to show you a slotting that we would do with the money. Obviously, there's some things left off, those things left off may be very important to the group. Let's use one as an example, the hospital request for funding from ARPA. Obviously, it wouldn't be a staff thing to put in how staff would do the money, but it may be very important to this commission. If it is important to this commission, that's where you have to look where staff kind of put these things and say, well, if we put the $1.1 million or whatever it is from the hospital for our overhang project, we need to move something out of where the staff put it. And we can either move it down the road, we can move it to Penny, we can move it. It's a lot of putting pegs into slot type thing. So this is a working document. This isn't what we're in the budget, but this is us distributing the money to start this process. And as you see, we've done a lot of different things than we gave you the things. We've slotted what we thought. There's a column in here where what we thought we'd have a decent chance to get from grant funding, right about to the end of the light blues. Before, that was in the list of, $40 million of projects with only, $10 million or whatever to do. So we put the portion that we thought would have the most advantageous over the next few years of getting grant fund. We took that off the equation and we decided to put it there. There may be some more of the projects that we slotted for ARPA that may be eligible for grant funding. The problem with some of these major ones is if you don't get that funding probably next year, you're going to be running on the time constraints to be able to use the ARPA money. And if you wait too long, you can't go back and use it because you won't meet the time constraints. We found some other places to go. For instance, when you look at the cybersecurity, we're able to look and in the water, Ron and Paul and everybody found in the water reserves and stuff, an ability to budget $1 million, to take $1 million off the $2 million we had and budget $1 million there, whereas only $1 million of the ARP money would have to be used, which again freed up another bit. In another column, we found impact, one place which was the potable water line replacements. In the third light blue column, you see where we put it from, we found there was enough money in water impact. So we tried to find other funds that we could find to take some of these numbers off of there and just slotting them into different places. Obviously, the big ticket item, we already talked about that. The fire station's a big ticket item. And you see how we distributed the design, part of the build, and then we went out a couple of years to the penny and put some money out. Plus, we had money from the cell tower in the first blue column. So we've tried to find every other source of money we could think of now, find some things that could go to grant, and distributed the money throughout these projects so you could have the maximum usage within the ARPA using the penny. Your job is knowing all the other things on the list that we have, the requests, the things that we want, and maybe some items that we don't know about. Again, we can take them, but they're going to have to go somewhere on this list and something needs to be moved out, and then we got to decide the one that's moved out, where we want to slot it for funding. So again, this is just a worksheet to use. Some of you might have a better method of worksheets to utilize to do it. We're trying to, Vice Mayor Lunt has one and stuff, but this is just get your general thing of where we've tried to look at every available fund for these money, try to do the maximum amount of projects over on the left-hand side. Obvious, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right now we've got in grant fund pending, or 7 in grant fund pending. We don't know if we're gonna, we don't know if we'll get some of them or not. We think we have a good chance by seeing what grants are gonna be awarded. And as you can see lately, we've been real successful. In fact, to the point we're gonna have trouble managing the amount of grants we're getting. And these includes, money from the state, the next year's appropriations. A couple of these things in that other column could come from the state. And also it's been brought up today, for instance, Commissioner Eisner brought up about bonds you could do. There's other ways besides the ones we have here that you could get another pot of money to do some of these projects. So it's a lot of decisions. It's a lot of important projects. They're all good. And we're trying to give you every bit of information we can on them to help you, whatever we need to help you with, to decide which projects of these, which are fitting most to the comprehensive plan that we're doing, which ones fit most into there, which ones are the ones that the citizens, when we've been doing the citizen survey, that the citizens are looking for in the future to improve the town. Again, you've got a tremendous job to set these out and set the course you can go, and that's going to be one of the major things. Aside from what we were doing in one about moving the apartments around, a lot of big, good projects that's going to be going on for the next 5 years that you have the ability to control the winds of. So it's going to take a lot of discussion, brainstorming, and getting to consensuses of what we do want to do, what we want to move, and then where we're going to move it. So this is the good thing about a work session, is an open discussion with everybody. So I've got some of my team out there to you and how we want to start. Again, this will be on the next one, the 28th. Item 2, the same thing, to discuss more, because obviously this is way too much for one night. So I was just hoping to get started tonight, and I know the mayor may have some ideas about to lead how we're going to do this. So maybe I'll turn it over to the mayor and get his thoughts.
Well, this is probably the most complex thing that I've looked at so far with the, and I'll tell you why, with the budget. I want to get some clarification, though, for Ron, for everybody here. Ron, if you could, Mr. Herring, I want to confirm that on just these projects that are the staff recommendations for the ARPA projects, if I'm not concerned about the ARPA funding, but it gets into some of the other funding. If we've got the current year penny, I understand that. The next year penny, what we're saying is that what you project that would be left over for other projects that would not, that the penny would not go to these other that we have listed here would be $78,000, right?
Correct. If you, under the penny next year, fiscal year 2023, it totals a little over 2.4 million. If you decided to allocate all those to 2023, yes, you'd only have $78,000 left.
Right, and then for 2024, it would be 607,000.
Remaining, yes.
And typically, what do we get for penny, just rough number for every year?
About 3.2 million. It goes up about 100,000 a year.
Okay, so the reason why I'm saying it's complex, because it just doesn't affect this year. It affects this commission's budget for next year and the year after.
Right.
And so that was one of the things that was is kind of like suggesting to do a lot of programming into the out years and things like that. Now, what you see here is the staff's recommendations, which quite frankly I think is important, and I'm always probably at first inclination to go with that and simply approve it and go with that. But I also want to, in Commissioner Eisner's point on bonds is extremely important, because some of these things that we've listed here would maybe more conducive for a bond issue than the ARPA money. And then also, Mr. Herring, our deadline for obligating the ARPA funds is December 31st, 2024, is that right?
Correct.
And then we actually have to have it all spent by the December 31st,
Cash all
2026.
gone by December 31st, 2026.
Right. So in addition to these, we also have some current projects that are in the works. We've got budget estimates for those that are old. We're experiencing some significant increases with, what was the latest one that we had that went to 3.5?
The Sponge Docks vault project.
Yeah, the vault project went from 1.7 to 2.5, and now it's 3.2, is that correct?
It's on the bottom.
It's on here, yeah.
It's on
Okay.
there.
3.5.
Right, 3.5.
We added money for, yeah.
So there's some other things that the designs are working on that we haven't even put out to RFP yet, and that's gonna that could very well wind up with some additional money. In addition, we've got what you have in your backup in your packets is the citizen initiatives, which is the Union Academy Museum, the Greektown Vision Plan, which, quite frankly, I think the staff is working pretty well with that.
And the 28th, when Renee is here,
Right.
that's one of the things she'll talk
And
about.
then the pickleball courts is another one. We've got the property purchases that are going to have to be paid for somehow. The hospital, city manager, of course, mentioned that. In the hospital thing, I want to talk about some of these specific, but let me just go through this. For sustainability, you also have a memorandum somewhere in your backup on the Sustainability Action Committee, our Sustainability Committee's recommendations as well. I think those are important. We haven't even discussed those, but those are there in your background. And also other things like the Whitcomb Bayou and all the other areas that are being flooded. We're just not going to, for example, the Sponge Docks pump station is just for the intersection of Athens and Dodecanese, $3.5 million. We've got the same thing at Roosevelt, Dodecanese. We've got the same thing at Hope Street in Dodecanese, and we just can't afford $10 million for, that sort of thing. So I've got an idea that I asked the city manager to discuss with somebody as far as maybe extending the capability of that down towards Hope Street. But all that's going to do is add more cost to the project, but it would be less, hopefully it would be less than doubling it for the double amount that would be for another pumping station. So this is a real complicated thing. And then like I said, the other projects that have been approved, and we're in Orange Street is another one, for example. I could imagine that's going to be a fairly expensive thing once we get that ready for to be bid. Lemon Street, Shattuck, all of those are on the same in the same boat. So I want us to be careful with budgeting because one, there's a lot of uncertainty here, and then it also affects the money that will be allocated for capital projects in the out years. For us in particular would be 2023 and fiscal year 2024 and 2025. So let's just get started with that. I hope I scared you. You should be scared. You're not. Okay, Commissioner Eisner. Good. All right. Vice Mayor Lunt. Yeah, I get worried about this stuff. This is what I worry about. So go ahead,
This
Vice
is
Mayor Lunt.
the fun part.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay.
I agree.
All right.
So I took a look at it, and I've kind of been harping on the ARPA stuff since day one. And my sort of intellectualization of the grant money from ARPA is that it should be going towards improvement that benefit all the people. Was meant to be a subsidization for whatever economic impacts happened over the couple of years that we put up with COVID, and hopefully it's over and doesn't reoccur. Anyway, having said that as a background, I looked at the community feedback pages and stuff that we got and the way it dressed down. And of course, you obviously have to winnow things out. So I came up with a list basically that didn't have some of this on. I'd like to know more about the $3.9 million of potential grant funding for cops and kids, because that's pretty high on my list. And I don't know anything about grant funding for that particular project. I do know I've toured the building, I've spent time with the kids, I've spent time with the people there, and it's falling apart. It does need to be replaced. I'm not quite so sure about what was discussed as far as a hub center. I know that came up, if we're going to build a new cops and kids building, let's have a hub center for other agencies. It was non-specific as to agencies. I'd like to know more about what that might comprise. But anyway, it really threw me when I saw this potential grant. Can anybody elucidate on where that might come from?
Well, again, if you look at the funding that's been going out there from federal funding and all the funding and stuff, the important, and Jeff's working on that process, and with all the services to the community that building would offer, not just the Cops and Kids Center, but the services that are now offered in Clearwater and stuff, I think that would be prime either for a state appropriation, maybe something from the congressman and the federal. That just, all the things that's doing there aligns with what the nature of what we're seeing for grants. For instance, 3 years ago, a lot of grants from the state and stuff were coming for fire stations, but we thought, maybe the future fire station be doing it. But you look at the last few, fire stations are out, and sustainability and things like this are in and stuff. So that's why some of these ones you see with the water, the sewer and stuff, why we have them on the potential grant list is those are the buzzwords and those are the buzz places where we're seeing all the grants coming out from. So that is the place where we, obviously, true to my heart and stuff, since I started the program and the things, that would be high over here in me. But thinking the totality of everything, it has a far better chance of getting grant money and getting assistance than a fire station would get, which is why.
Yeah, I understand that.
Why it'd be there, why it's slotted in. And as all those are based on the potential of what we're seeing the last year or so and what we're hearing the future grants going, that those have a higher chance of us being able to gain the grant for them. And that's why they're placed there. Obviously, any of them can be placed back over there and stuff, but we tried to bring the ones out of here that would be most
Yeah, I
grant
just wondered
eligible.
where the figure came from and what it was. So to continue on, septic to sewer for South Florida was again another grant item. This is following the same sort of reasoning?
Yes.
So are all of these items kind of following the same
Yes.
sort of,
What we're
just a best thumb guess?
What we're seeing coming up, what we're seeing in the grants that are coming out and that the grants that they've been awarding, there's a lot of money for that we're seeing out there to get now. You know, where we fall and get, there's just more capability of getting those things. And remember, that's something that's right now slotted. We've already got that. Paul will tell you and go a little further into our action plan, but it's slotted for 2026. Yeah. So it's already in our program to do in 26. The efforts are, there's an opportunity to move it up. And looking for the grants is not that we don't have it anywhere. In the water and sewer funding, if the funding stays the same, it's programmed already. But the hope is the sooner you can get sewer, you know, for the environment, the sooner you can do it, the better. And we think the capabilities of moving it up, you know, there's a good chance to get the grants that way.
So my general thoughts, my general thoughts on projects like septic to sewer and projects like the vault at the end of Athens and Dodecanese and major infrastructure projects that are costing us millions and millions of dollars, those are probably ripe for bond issue. I think the city should carry it.
You're
I
right
think it
about
should
that,
carry it
yeah.
over a number of years, and I think we ought to get them bloody well done, because they're not going away, and we keep dribbling away at them, and costs keep going up, and we need to sort of bite the bullet. I know we carry a very low profile. Ron probably can back this up for me, but I know we carry a very low profile as far as amount of debt per capita that we carry, and that's really, really nice to see. But I'm not quite sure how realistic it is, because we have such severe infrastructure problems that are just not going to go away. They're just going to, we're putting Band-Aids here, we're putting Band-Aids there, and what we're looking at is the next 20 years of fixing Band-Aids, and that's just way too long. That's not doing a service to the people of Tarpon Springs when we could fix them over the next 5 years and then pay for them over the next 20, and they'd be actually doing some useful use rather than trying to Band-Aid. Anyway, that's my thoughts on those kind of things. So further on this, I understand there's additional money for the, the public safety roof chiller project, and other money also that is being requested of ARPA for excuse me, over talking here, for the Bayshore septic to sewer that it's already been, I don't know where it is in its planning or whatever, but
Design, yeah.
it's already in the design stage and stuff like that. And I think that's fine. I think we should put that aside maybe as a contingency because it's already part of the ARPA stuff that's been funded, and that would be a good continuation. There might be, the way we've been doing things these days, we damn well need a contingency fund. Everything seems to be coming in 30% more expensive than we figured in a 6-month period, and we just need to respect that. As far as the non-funded stuff, again, back to my principle of, or at least my personal thoughts on where this ARPA money really needed to go. I'm kind of leaning towards the hospital, not so much for the overhang. I think the roof needs to be fixed. So it's roughly around the same dollar amount. But I'm thinking it's not much good if you can get into a hospital if your patient areas are being damp. Nobody wants to be lying in a bed and have bedpans catching other things than it should. I guess I heard that we're progressing with the Greek Historic Society's plan, which is fine by me. It's got my full support. ARPA money would be a great use for that as far as I'm concerned. The urban tree inventory, I don't think we're doing enough with it. I know Costa probably agrees with me. We need to plant more trees in this town. And I think we also need a good idea of where those trees need to be planted.
We just got that grant.
All right, well,
We just got that grant.
fine.
Never mind.
Never mind, next. Again, I've heard from numerous residents, and it's probably because of my association with my wife, but pickleball courts are being in a demand for a couple of years now, and it's not going away. I have two things that didn't appear to be in the budget for facilities maintenance and for the fire department. One was $379,000, one was $704,000. It's my strong feeling that we don't do enough proactive maintenance on our facilities in this town. So any time that I see maintenance, I'm going to be for it because we need to do that. I mean, things like the diesel tank wearing out, the public service building chiller and roof being in complete disrepair, the station with the fire station on Gulf Road needing pretty much repairs just to keep it operational is not something that I like to see. It's something that should never have occurred to the extent, as far as from my opinion, that it is now. So when it's a maintenance device, I'm for getting it done now. It's only going to cost us more later. Beckett Bridge still needs to be paid for. Even though the county's not planning on doing anything for another year, we still need to reroute all the facilities under Beckett Bridge. Not a small undertaking. I think that's something that could be funded as well. A bunch of people use that bridge. So it should be part of that whole thing. And I think we're giving short shrift overall to rec center stuff. The buildings in Craig Park could use some rehab. The recreation center on Walton Street, as far as flooring, it needs striping. The lighting in there is 30 some odd years old or whatever. It's pathetic. It's just not up to modern standards. They've asked for striping and lighting and stuff like that. And also hurricane hardening, which I think is a bit much for this particular budget. So anyway, in general, that's kind of where I'm thinking. And obviously I have a list, so if you need to see it, I'll be glad to pass it on.
Thank you.
Thanks, sorry for taking up so much time.
That's okay, Commissioner Carr.
I just want to make sure I understand correctly. We're going to be talking about the ARPA funding specifically, or just all capital projects, Mark?
Well, the answer is yes and no. Yes, we're talking about the ARPA funding this evening, but then there's a whole lot of other things that are attached to that. And as I said, the initial inclination would just go ahead and take the staff's recommendations and go with it.
Sure.
But then it affects the out years.
Understood.
And then we've got a whole ton of other things. And I think, for me, as I said, the challenge is to integrate everything in a way of getting back to Vice Mayor Lunt, getting these things done rather than just talking about them. And so I think the idea is to talk about ARPA.
Sure.
And then bring in some of these other things that you might feel would be important, or how do we go about it?
Got it, yeah. No, I mean, it's an art for sure, balancing all this together, different areas, different parts of the city, different departments. So for sure, I respect the staff's recommendation. So I would like to understand a little bit more from staff. So the city received some type of grant from the state. It was last year that the state approved multiple phases of grants for sea level rise. So one was the study to be done. I believe the city received that grant. And then the second one is actually getting the money to fix all the stuff that you come back with the report on the sea level rise. So I'm not aware of that, how we're going to go target that money. There's a huge bucket of money out there that the state put out there. I don't remember how many millions, but it was a significant amount of millions. So with that, I don't know if that's an area where we could target Craig Park, an area we could target maybe the sponge docks, a couple different other areas that we could target. So maybe that's just something we could look at from a staff level and come back at the next meeting, Mark, just to have a better understanding what we could target to maybe address some of these areas that are talked about in the ARPA funding, but then actually have it paid for by the state as well too. Vice Mayor Lunt brought up about the hospital. I think it's important that the city shows some good faith in this opportunity. Advent Health has invested a significant amount of money into the hospital. There's a significant amount of money that needs to be invested still, and if the city shows them that the city's willing to put some money into the building that they own, I think it's going to be good faith to have additional investments from Advent Health coming from their corporate office back into the city of Tarpon Springs. It's a great asset that we have here in Tarpon Springs. It's getting better and better as a building itself. So I do think that's an important one. I'm encouraged by the bayou dredging that's on here as well too. Again, there's feet of silt in the bottom of the bayous. There's no way for the seagrass to grow to help out the marine life. It's just it's polluted. And then also when you're looking at the runoffs, it would be additional space for runoff to go to if you're able to dredge that. If you're looking for areas, don't get me wrong, I completely support our library, but I think the library might be an area that we could pull some money back from in the ARPA funding. I do feel that's important to talk about the cops and kids, and I know I'm speaking fast. If you want me to slow down, I'm happy to do that.
No.
You just want me to stop, right? So the library is an area I think we could pull back from and maybe try to go for a grant one more year, try to get some other people involved with that grant. The portable water, I think it's important. The way that the ARPA funding was written, it's really to address moving water, and that's, I think, a no-brainer to have that $1 million there. And it's going to help the water quality with replacing the many, many miles that we have of cast iron pipes within the city. One thing I want to bring up is just a thought process behind this. I know we have a community initiative about doing, the 500 East Oakwood Street, a museum/community center for almost $500,000. And my thought process behind this is that we have multiple museums that we aren't utilizing today. For instance, like the Cultural Center, the old City Hall, is mostly empty. There's plenty of space there for a museum. But then as I thought a little bit further about an opportunity within the Union Academy, if there's a goal to build a new Cops and Kids building, you've got the youth in the building at that building already. That's a great opportunity to have a museum tied in with some type of area of the history of the Union Academy to really teach the youth of where this neighborhood has come from, where it's been, and really get the history back to the youth. So instead of having two separate buildings that have to be staffed by two different types of staff members, actually tie that end together with the Cops and Kids building. And that would be further on down the line. That would just be a different approach to looking at getting some type of historic museum, although we already have one at the train station, but that could be an opportunity to try to spread the funds out further by combining those two together. From a fire station standpoint, I think it's important that we move forward with the fire station. It's a significant amount of money. About a year and a half ago, I had the city clerk's office pull together some pricing for some of the new fire departments that are being built that I saw. Dunedin, Siesta Key, Sarasota, they're in the $3+ million range. Now, a year and a half later, the fire chief was telling me they're looking at these fire stations doubling in pricing, and that's what we're seeing right now with this quote that's come before us. So to me, I think it's important that we do have that built out of the flood zone, hardened for a hurricane, so it could service that side of Tarpon Springs. A couple individuals brought up the idea about bonding, and that was one of the discussions I had with Mark at one point about the solar panels on some of the larger buildings. You could look at it from a green initiative, or you could look at it from a business initiative, or you could look at it together, right? The solar panels will eventually pay for themselves after a certain amount of years, and at that point, you're not putting that money back into Duke Energy, you're putting it right back into the general funds. So after, let's say, 7 years after they're paid off, you've got another 15, 20 years to where you can use that money for staffing increases or things along those lines. So I do think solar panels is a good idea to go after for our large buildings, especially the ones that are using the most energy. I've got a question, Mark. How did the Craig Park seawall number come to 5.1 million, and where does that seawall start and stop?
It's an estimate. It's all of the city's portion, which goes around to the platform, not with the riparian rights, because there's a whole nother issue dealing with that. So it's the actual where the city has the complete right of way and everything.
So where they dive for the cross to the boat ramp?
Yes.
Is it the complete, I'm sorry, is it the complete walkway? The entire walkway around?
Not from where the owners own that property.
Okay, it's not from where the riparian rights are,
Yes.
just basically.
So it starts at Tarpon Avenue and runs to the boat ramp. Okay, and the goal is to just raise that up a certain amount of feet. Is that how that?
Well, in the design, they'll tell you how best to do it, but obviously there'll have to be some raising and securing of that street wall. When it gets to the design, they'll start doing. And that's the money we got. We asked for $4 million from Congressman Bilirakis. He got us $2 million. Obviously, and surprisingly fast, he got us that $2 million. Obviously now, instead, we asked for $4 million because we thought we could find $1 million to do, but obviously we have to find $3 million. So that's why that was included in the ARPA, because we're actually, unless something happened, there's another hurdle getting through that it could get cut from the federal budget. But after that hurdle, they'll be ready to work on their process, which takes a little bit of time, months or more. But they'll be handing us that money, expecting us to go forward with that project. So, and again, that's just the best estimate we got from our people we consulted with. I think he was involved. That's the number we thought we'd have. Hopefully, it's close to being right, because higher will be problematic. But hopefully, that's right.
And the goal is just to prevent water from coming over, right, in the future. It's been coming over for years, but
plus
been worse.
you got serious issues with
Structural.
as you see now,
Okay.
structural with that seawall. I'd say the structural seawall is first, and while we're doing that, we can handle what we need to do to get that up and stuff. But I think the most important thing is securing the seawalls.
Yeah, I mean, you look at pictures from like the early 1900s, and that was there. The sidewalk going around the bayou was there. So, no, I think it's an important thing. I do think that there's an opportunity to get state funding through the sea level rise portion of the state dollars that are out there. I mean, there's a significant amount of millions. A couple other things is the North Pinellas corridor that has $500,000 listed there, Mark. I think under unfunded department capital requests, is that right?
And we've got most of them. We'll be coming back to you. We've found most of the money for a recommendation in some other places to move that from the unfunded to the funded list. That doesn't involve what you have here.
Okay.
So that's coming in the budget. That was one of the top priorities, because the reason is because it's looking like we're finally going to get a decision from FDOT within a month, for 4 to 6 weeks. We'll get that decision to go forward. If we get that decision to go forward, we need to go before they change their mind. So that was one of the number one things of the unfunded that we wanted to find within some places within the budget we have now, and we'll be coming back to you with the ability to fund it, not affecting this list you have in front of you.
Okay.
Because we think we're going to have to be a go on that. It might not be all that we want on the go, but it'll be something that we need desperately.
Got it. I mean, I'm full support of that. That's just an eyesore of Tarpon Springs for the majority of our tourists going by that. A couple things I saw: multiple roofs need to be replaced from different areas, small, large. Something if you could look into from a staff standpoint is looking to replacing with metal instead of like traditional shingles. Metal roofs tend, bad example is the library, but metal roofs tend to have a significantly long lifespan than a traditional shingle roof. And so if the cities could pay another 20%, 30% more for metal, I think it's a good idea to move with the metal route, just from a longevity standpoint for the roofs.
And again, that's one thing we're going back and evaluating. The reason it was on the cut list is we thought it could wait another year, but we're doing one more reevaluation to make sure that we were correct in that assumption and that we don't need to add that to the list that we find funding for. But the reason it was moved is the thought that he was trying to get it done now, but it could wait another year without any chance. But again, we're going to reaffirm that, because before this budget ends and we dedicate things, if there's anything, and of course, because of Vice Mayor Lunt and some of what the others say, we're going to go back and evaluate all of those things that we talked about building maintenance. We're going to reevaluate all of those things, and in course of it, maybe look for some alternatives within the funding of the budget as we have it now.
Got it. I did see one of the I think the fencing around the tennis courts in Riverside, it's been in rough shape for many, many years from a rusty standpoint. I think that's on one of the lists of unfunded, but it's listed there. And another area too is just the security cameras at certain parts of our parks, if it's Sunset Beach or a couple of our other parks. I do think it's important to have some type of surveillance camera there, not just to monitor people, but to go back to, because I mean, there's all types of stuff that happens in public spaces that
and that's another place we're thinking we can get funding from within the budget that we have, that we're working on. We think we can get it from there. So. And
then did the dock at Sunset Beach, did that just go away, or is that still in the works somewhere?
That's on hold, because the biggest problem was it's not going to be able to accomplish what the citizen who came to us and went forward with. It's not able to accomplish that because of the regulatory issues.
Okay. Is there any option to do anything there or no?
It just wouldn't be the part where you could take your father, put him onto a boat.
Okay.
It wouldn't be the dock where the request started and to look at. It would just be one that go out, but.
You can't pull your boat up there.
You wouldn't be able to do the functionality that was the whole intent of trying to do it, because of the regulatory. When we did the examination of the regulatory, that location, they wouldn't allow it.
Got it. And then I do want to make sure that we are, from a city standpoint, we're going to be requesting fundings from the county and the state. I think we've done a great job requesting money from the state over the past few years. I think we need to step up and ask money for the county this year as well too, for a special project outside of what the county jurisdiction is, but actually a city project from the county. Thanks.
Commissioner Eisner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I did some numbers I ran, and what I did was I took all of the recommendations and just said, let's see how much money we have versus whether we're going to be short or enough to pay. So I noticed that we were shy of the non-ARPA funding of $25,907,000, which is the bottom number. I realized that we had 15 million in at least potential approved grant funding. And I took that and minused it out and came back at the time with about 10 million short, give or take, 10 million for. At the time, I used the numbers that were provided, which I later found out were not correct. So I had thought that there was about 7.5 million still in the addition of all the CRAs and all of the penny funds, just to see where we would wind up. And I originally came up with 2.9 million short, which is what made me think about all these answers of bonding and possibly millage rates, and, because you gotta make this up some way if you're gonna utilize that, or you have to start minusing from it. Subsequent to that, I had found the number to be, I believe it is now 13 million shy, 13.4. So if we accept all of what the recommendations are, which I'm not looking to do, we still would be shy $13.5 million that we have to find out, and that's with not including anything else that has come before us. That's not the Florida purchases or the Stafford, the Stofers, no projects. So I am in agreement, I don't know who mentioned it, as far as, you know, at least stalling or pulling back the library. That's $500,000. I also feel that there is ARPA money that still needs to be utilized for either homeless or COVID people. And how that gets distributed is not my purview right now, but they have to get something. There are people that are suffering, and I just think that that is part of what ARPA should be. You know, poor people know how to be poor. People that make money and became poor through no fault of their own don't know how to be poor. And I think that that is our job, to try to at least give them a fighting chance. So I had down here, again, I don't know where I'm taking it from, but I have here at least $587,000. And we could pull the 500 from the library. I hope the library doesn't want to take my head off, but what can I say? It's either replacing carpet and fixing things up, or having people not being able to live. So if I have to make that choice, that's the choice I'm going to go with. I do agree that we should be helping out the hospital. To what degree, whether it be the roof leaking or the covering over the front. I'm open to any and all ideas. I'm not really strict on it. I do believe, I wouldn't go with the, as Commissioner Carr said, the fence, but the Riverside tennis courts over there was the only thing that I tended to look at. I pass by it every single day. They use it extensively, and I also think that they're in poor condition, and we do need security cameras there. I know there's been damage done to the concession stand. It's a place when the lights are on and it's bright, it's great. When it's not, we do need to have some security cameras there. I know that they've allotted $200,000. I don't think that's the end of the world. I think that can be done. Again, where we're going to get it from is pulling money out of the recommendation, from the planning. The fire station, I have here, it's a lot of money, and I would either do it on a 5-year payment plan, do it now, but pay it off like similar to what we did with the, with the fire truck. And just pay the interest on it, and, or do a bond, one of the two. That frees us up, $3.1 million to utilize elsewhere. So that's about as far as I went. I believe if we can't balance it, as much as I'd like not to move the millage rate at all, I would then need to have somebody give me some figures on how much we could move it to make back how much we're short. Because I still don't know what else we need to put money towards. You know, I still need a hard copy of the have-tos. What do we have to do versus what do we want to do versus what do we need to do? You know, my conversation with city manager was, I wanted him to put together a code where we know this is something that just, if we don't do it, we lose the building. Versus, we need to do this because it's just not attractive or not safe. Versus, you know, and just go down the line, because without us, all of us going to inspect each and every one of these facilities, you don't know exactly to what extent the condition of it is. Can we wait a year, or is it no? Can we wait 2 years, or is it a no? So it's without having these variables in my hand, I'm guessing at where I'm spending money. And I just don't like doing that. So that is my, I need more information rather than we just want to spend 3.9 million on a cops and kids. I mean, I know that's something I'd like to do. But I need to know what the importance of all of these are, at what level. Because if we haven't, you know, earlier, Vice Mayor spoke about how all these things have been in repair. I don't want to bring up the prior boards or the decisions that were made, but there was some really important stuff here that had to be taken care of, and I just watched money get squandered. And I don't know why that was done, but it's done. So, I mean, these look like all important things. You know, the dredging needs to be done, the stormwater needs to be done. You know, I just need to know a priority list of where we really have, because we just don't have all this money. And that's what I do see. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to go up with the millage. Or we have to do bonds. You know, we're gonna have to do something. You can't, we don't have a money machine. And I'm not looking to hurt any one person, but I've got to be here to make a decision of the lesser of two evils. So that's my take on it. That's why I did just the bulk math, just to see how behind we are. And we're behind.
Thank you, Commissioner Eisner. Commissioner Kulyas.
Well, we're talking about bonds for capital improvement projects, the ARPA funds. We need some help. So,
I'll write you a check.
right? Just from the packet that we'd got, I'm all for the Greektown preservation, placemaking vision. I'll support the pickleball courts this time around, but I will put a request in for next year, the following year, for a basketball court at Riverside Park, Riverside Field, and I hope that could be a fair trade-off.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Were you speaking to me?
Everyone.
Okay.
I agree.
Horse trading now?
Sustainability, creating a green infrastructure plan for 100 grand, I would support. And regarding these big capital improvement projects, I mean, Craig Park, is that something we think we can get done by December 2026?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm all for that. I mean, the $1 million for the roof for the hospital, and I did see on that, they placed the higher priority for the awning, so I don't know which one's more important. I'd like to try to get one of the two this year, but I would think the roof overall from the top would be more important. But so just something to consider. But the fire station 70, absolutely design. We got to start, that's a good infrastructure for the west side of town for service and everything. A lot of these are just staff recommendations, and if we can just get Ron and all of us work together where we decide we're going to do bonds or how we're going to split it up, it's fairly open to it all. So, thank you.
Okay, well, I want to take the big picture approach, because I don't want to get into I know that the staff is looking for guidance on funding for this year. We need to get that done. But I also think we need to create some kind of a policy or philosophy for what we're going to do before we make those decisions. Let me just give you an idea of what I'm talking about. There's a half a dozen or so projects that can come out of this ARPA thing, in addition to the supplemental funding that's needed for the sponge docks flooding, plus 3 more of those packages. And that comes out to about $25 million that you can do. That would be a minimum as far as an infrastructure bond issue. So that would, this is kind of a policy big picture approach before we start spending money. So, either we're going to address flooding or we're just going to continue talking about it. The Whitcomb Bayou thing has just gone on and on and on and on, and it started with riprap, and now we're working towards, I think, in a very methodical way. It's not quick, but we're working towards that. But nevertheless, there's a lot of things that we know how to fix them. We need the money, and I think that we're talking about trade-offs here and there. They all need to be fixed, and they should have been fixed many years ago. So I think that we need to talk about, in addition to ARPA, we need to talk about a bond issue. Now, my just saying that is real easy to say. It's a very complicated matter that you have to do the funding. You have to get an idea of how much you could, what your credit would be for the whole thing, the interest rates and everything. So you've got that. The hospital, the difference, and there's nuances to everything that's being produced, that is being proposed here, that you need to think your way through this. The hospital, I'm pretty sure the awning is, and they actually identify that in the memorandum as a priority. The reason why it's a priority is because they can't do the wrap to hurricane harden that building until they do the awning. I think the roof is going to get done. But when I spoke to Jason Dunkel, and he's leaving, but the point was we need to get the awning done to get the wrap. Okay, so the wrap is $25 million, but I suspect it might be a little easier for them to justify that, hardening their facilities so they don't have to evacuate, I don't know how many beds, and that was a nightmare to evacuate all those beds to some other, where was it, one of the schools down Palm Harbor or something like that, right?
They had several different places. I think they moved.
Yeah, there was an incident where the hospital had to be evacuated to take them down to Palm Harbor. And then, so this wrap is very important to them. So I think the roof is going to get done. That's the thing that we need to think about. The Union Academy Museum, we wound up getting that grant today for creating, actually it's for inventorying the neighborhood buildings, and it's the first step in moving towards creating a character preservation district for Union Academy. And the museum, as we would call it on Oakwood Street, is very much a part of that sort of effort, community pride. And so why is that so important? Well, if you talk to many of the realtors, the inventory is basically gone from within town. So now we've got these people, institutional buyers, deep pocket buyers coming in and and picking houses off of the fringe of the Union Academy neighborhood and gentrifying it. And gentrifying, okay, is great for people who are down in, you know, like Tampa and some of these other places. But for Tarpon, it just basically prices people out of their homes. And we got problems enough. So that's the whole, from my perspective, that's the priority of what we're working on with Union Academy. It's to kind of preserve the culture, the character of that neighborhood. And that's where Mrs. Dabbs is coming from as far as this Oakwood building is. Actually, she stated it was a community center, and she's got some ideas on it. So I don't want to rule that out right now. I'm not ready to make a decision on it, of course, tonight, but I'm not ready to rule that out. The Greektown Vision, this is $60,000. I've had several conversations with Ms. Vincent. Ms. Vincent's had several conversations with Tina Bukavalis and B. Balikas from the Greektown, Tarpon Springs Greektown Heritage Association. And where I think the city's moving towards right now is to create a preservation district for that. And there's a variety of ways to do it. Ms. Vincent is moving in that regard. She's got to do some thinking about it. Either you extend the Sponge Dock Special Area Plan, you create a new area plan, but it's more of a preservation, not like you have a historic district where they have to go before a board to get certain things, but there are guidelines that have to be created in the whole thing. So that $60,000, I don't know, is that important right now in the sense, but it has to be part of our general fund funding for the planning department. So that's real important, but that's the big picture part of that. The pickleball courts, I don't have an issue with pickleball. I don't have an issue with bocce. I don't have an issue with shuffleboard. I really don't. And the thing I do have an issue is where it's going to go. And this is a conversation the city manager and I have had. It's targeted for that area across the street from the dog park. And there was an attempt to do that last time, and it got wrapped up into taking out green space and having to do a new land use for that particular parcel. And because recreation did not fit in the land use category that it called for. But if you look at the special area plan, it's what's called the Community Gateway District. It's a community gateway. We've got a southern gateway on alternate 19 coming up from Mears, and we've got the eastern gateway, which is Tarpon Avenue. It's supposed to be the entryway to our communities. And I'm not so sure, and when you look at the special area plan, as far as what goes into those gateway districts, recreation is not listed there. So I don't know, and I don't, obviously at this point, we've got there what we've got, but expanding recreation there, I'm not so sure from a planning perspective, at least the way I see it, is a good thing if we're considering that truly to be a gateway. I mean, for example, you could use the analogy, you've got the vacant property next to the Kouskoutis building and the Theophilopoulos law office. Why don't we put pickleball courts in there? Well, you're just not going to do that. That's a gateway into the city. Same thing down at the corner of Mears and alternate 19. Why not put pickleball courts in that vacant spot? It's just a gateway. You don't do that. So why would we do that in this community gateway that's the entryway into the sponge docks? So I think, from my perspective, I don't have an issue. An alternative would be, and the city manager, I basically asked him about it. I don't know how he feels about it. But if we're going to have a cops and kids center, and I know there's this complex down there that we could create, I don't know how much land is available, but I don't understand why we wouldn't start focusing in on our recreation assets in that area if we've got the room. Pickleball, bocce,
Which area is this? I'm sorry.
shuffleboard courts, down where the cops and kids would go. And I don't know whether there's enough room or not. I think it's some school board property that we would lease.
Not enough room.
Pardon me?
There's not enough room.
Well, there's another, not where the current one is, but where the new one would go. We're moving the way station.
understand.
We're moving the way station for,
Across the street, yeah.
yes,
across
and
Mary's, yeah.
that whole area is, I think it's city property, I might be wrong. But what I'm getting at is I think we need to think about that. I don't have an issue with, really, we could fund them. It's just where do we put them? And so that's how I feel about that. We haven't talked about the property purchases. We've got several property purchases. They're not here on the radar screen. I mentioned the hospital. The sustainability improvements are very important. I think we need to look at those a little harder. And then I mentioned the Whitcomb Bayou and all the other flooding issues, and I really think that if we're going to deal with these things, and they're getting worse and worse, and people are really getting fed up with it, we should be talking about a bond. The sidewalk around the bayou of Craig Park, it's just a structural nightmare. Sections begin to collapse, and we put cones up there, and we have to spend money to fix it. And it's more than just the flooding. It's really outlived its time frame. When I grew up in that area, the whole place was dilapidated. I mean, the whole seawall and everything was dilapidated, and it was fixed in the 60s, so it's 60 years old right now, and there's been this infiltration of salt water into the concrete, and all the reinforcing steel is gone. That's why you have these failures that are going on. But I wouldn't want to just do from, I guess it's all the way around by the, we've done a part around by the tourist club, the Seawall, so we're talking about the sidewalk from the Heritage Center sidewalk all the way over to the dock, right?
Close somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
and then from the dock all the way down to where Reed Street is basically easement that the city has from the property owners that live across the street. I'd like to, whatever we do, to do the funding for all of it, so once we start, we do the whole thing. I just can't envision having part of the sidewalk maybe a foot or two higher and then the other one's still low. I just don't, why would we do that? I think we need to do either none of it or do the whole thing. And we've got the $2 million from the Congress, but we're gonna obviously need a lot more. So, so that's why I'm saying, for me, it's a complicated thing. It's more than just, giving these projects a go, because some of them are a little more complicated than just funding them and having them built. I really think that there's some policy or some philosophical aspects to some of these that we need to think our way through before they're funded. Now, have I helped us make any progress towards this tonight? No, but still, I think you see the challenge that we're facing. If you agree with me, fine. If you don't, then we can just move ahead the way things have happened in the past maybe, but I just don't like the fact that we talk about things every year that are important, like flooding and stuff like that, and really we don't make any progress in that. The bond was something that has been on my mind a while. It would have to be, in my opinion, out of the stormwater or a combination stormwater, sewer, and water. Bonds out of the general fund, you basically what you use your taxing revenue as collateral. That's generally a no-no. So you would want to do your infrastructure projects from sewer, water, and that sort of thing, and leave your general fund alone. At least that's the way it's been done in the past. So if the commission has some kind of thoughts along that line, I would like for y'all to share that with the city manager, and at least that's my spiel for tonight. I don't have an issue with anything that was presented as far as needing to be done. I really don't. It's just how we go about funding it and where some of these things go is what we do. I mean, I just, we need to have a vision. We have a vision, the strategic plan, but we need to have a vision for our recreational facilities, where they're gonna go, and things of that nature that we haven't really gotten to that point yet. Anybody else have got anything to say about that?
Yes.
Commissioner Eisner.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to explain to you, I didn't know that the Craig Park was only up until that point.
Yeah.
So if they're coming in at $5.2 million up to that point, it's easily estimated that that would be $10 million
Yeah,
to
of
go
course.
around. Beside the fact, you then would have issues with all of the docks that were built as well. You know, I think only one dock just recently caved in at the
You
sidewalk.
mean private docks?
Private dock,
Yeah.
right. I know one person built a dock and they built it up maybe a foot higher, but if we are looking to build it up 2 feet higher, I mean, then who's responsible for the docks being changed? We start getting into some sticky areas, and that's all, I'm sure you realize all this. I just wanted to say it because,
That's why I said it's very complicated.
yes,
Yeah, I mean,
You
it
know,
really,
it's-
really is.
so,
There's a lot of nuances. We can make a decision tonight, and the city manager could come back 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month from now and say, well, we got a problem. I mean, and I don't want that to happen. I think we need to think things through. I'm not saying that we shouldn't approve projects tonight. Shouldn't obviously approve projects in this budget, but we need, the ones that we do approve, we need to make absolutely sure that that's gonna work for us. And the ones that get wrapped up into something of a bigger picture, more complicated, we need to kind of think that through a little more as well. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, so you bring up a good point about the bonding situation. Again, however that can be tied into the state funding, like there's significant funds that the governor put out there with the state speaker, and when they, I think, even signed the bills and at Rusty Bellies when they did it, right? So there's some type of correlation and tie-in, I think, what we could do into that. So hopefully we could tap into
Yeah, no.
many, many millions.
That's, I mean, you're right, and that's the complication of it. I mean, it really is. I mean, the first thing that you do is you do a financial study to see what our credit rating would be or what we're capable of borrowing. Then you hire a bond attorney. Then he does through the necessary paperwork. Then you find somebody that you actually establish the bond with, and then those actually have to be sold as investments to people.
Right.
So I've gone through this before. We did that with it never came to fruition, but there was a medical school. Remember the medical school?
Yeah.
It was an osteopathic college that they were going to build associated with our hospital. And they went through the whole deal. We were going to issue the bonds for that hospital, for that medical school. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. But we actually went through the drill of issuing the bonds for that. Paul, I know you're there and probably falling asleep. Don't we have a bond for the RO plant? Yeah. And we have a bond, we still have an outstanding bond for the septic, for the treatment plant as well, is that correct?
No, not for the wastewater plant, but I did want to say, Mayor, thank you, Paul Smith here. I did want you to consider that these bonds, the debt service, I mean, they're just basically giant loans, and the debt service is significant. I mean, if I recall, Ron, we're paying about $2 million a year for that RO plant bond series, and that's with a huge grant that we won from the SWIFT-MUD to pay for almost half the project. So I just want you to understand that if you do vote to do big projects with bonds, that'll be a drain on your operating costs through a 20, 30-year period. So it's a big commitment. There's some upsides to them as well in something they call intergenerational equity, where you're having generations pay for improvements, not just putting it all on the people right now to pay for a big project that has a long life. So just some things to think about.
Yeah, and on that point, that's the one thing I've always had a pet peeve with condominiums that continue kicking down improvements down, when they need to be done, they keep, kicking them down the road, and what happens, the people that actually created the problem are gone, and the people that own them at that particular time have to pay for all of them. So it's not a good situation when you've got a lot of things that need to be done because they haven't been addressed, as we've gone along, and now we reached a point. It doesn't mean that we can't live with some of these things, continue living with some of these things, but there's got to be something that's got to be done so that the residents understand that they just have to be that we're going to be addressing them. And it's not going to happen. And who asked me about the 3 years? Was it you, Commissioner Kulyas? About whether everything is going to be done by 2026? That was based
the
on
Craig Park
a date that
project.
was in there, yeah. It's not going to be done in my 3 years, I can tell you that, all these things. But somehow there needs to be some plan in place that we could see this, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, that's why I'm saying this thing to me is a little scary, because I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's overwhelming with the amount of stuff that we have to do. And so, anyway. I don't know what, I don't want to belabor this point. We're not going to solve any problems tonight, but I just wanted to share with you and that's an excellent point, Paul, because I don't know what our credit rating is. I don't know what the deal is, but that's something that we would have to look into. It would be some, but whether that's something we would want to do, I don't know. It's a decision, a hard decision that we would have to make.
I do know our credit rating.
Pardon me?
I said, I do know our credit rating. It's currently sitting at a AA. From a bond position, I think as a commission, we're allowed to go up to the $10 million mark without having to go for a referendum. Anything over that, especially like the $25 million you mentioned, would have to go to a referendum. So
Right.
the voters are going to have a say on this, a big say on this.
Right.
Whether they want to pay for, the next thing. And it is a debt load. Now, one more comment. One of the first things I did when I started looking at finances I'm not talking about this budget, I'm talking about when I was running for commission, I started taking a look at the finance of Tarpon Springs and comparing them to other cities. Everybody always talks about how really cool Dunedin is and how they got all this stuff done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They did the bond thing. That's how they got there. They carry a much, much higher per capita expense for bonds and stuff like that. However, they seem, which is one of the deciding factors when they decided to stay with Pinellas County Police and stuff like that, was to carry their bond issue. So we need to really think about it. We pay, what was it, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million a year right now for the RO facility bonds and so forth. This bond looks to be just about similarly sized or maybe bigger. So that's another thing out of our operating budget that's gonna need heavy consideration. For an aspect of looking at all these projects and saying what has to be done now, what can we live with, et cetera. We have 2 master planners in our staff. Can we get somebody to assign some time to maybe take a look at this just from a totally project point of view and start piecing it together? So if we had to do all this sort of stuff, what it might look like?
For me to answer your question is that has to happen. I've also got some concerns about how much work the staff is facing right now too. It's not like they're just sitting there wondering about what they do next. They're all especially the planning staff is extremely busy with stuff, and that would be up to the city manager as far as how to deal with that. I've always told Ms. Vincent not to be shy about asking for help, a level of service contract or something like that. Maybe there is something that she could use in that regard. And I don't think it would just be Ms. Vincent. I think Mr. Smith and his crew would have to get involved as far as the infrastructure and stuff, yeah. I know it probably shocked the city manager a little bit, but that's really how I feel. This is a very, for example, I would have a hard time, my conscience would bother me to tell the residents we're spending $3.5 million at the corner of Athens and Dodecanese while we still continue with flooding at Hope and Roosevelt and elsewhere down there. It's like, you still got to go from one end of Dodecanese to the other. Okay, you get past Athens Street, but now you hit Hope Street and Roosevelt. I don't know. Those are the sort of things that kind of bug me a little bit about some of this stuff anyway. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think we've had a good discussion on item 2
Yeah.
to be continued.
That's a good discussion. And, you know, I want to apologize, we didn't have any more specific questions for you, but they're more philosophical and policy.
Oh, they were here to listen too, to put together,
Yeah.
to keep moving the process and put together what we need to put together next, so.
Yeah. I think what y'all are doing are great. It's just, for me, I'm struggling with a little more of a, you know, higher level, how do we do it? And not leave any part of the community out and not tell people, well, we can't, you know, this has been this way for, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years, and why we can't take care of it in the next 5, 10, 20 years, I don't know.
5, 10
I mean, they're
minutes.
not gonna wanna hear that. Yeah, we buy snorkels and face masks for people, I guess, so, anyway, all right.
Thanks, Paul. And I just need Ron for number 3, so, thank you.
You know, you're talking, I just wanted to interject a little bit. You're talking about the bonding and financing. I know one thing you might want to think about is it's a revenue note. And it would be the penny fund as a backing. And as the Vice Mayor Lunt says, you keep it under the 10 million there, you don't have to go for a referendum, but a popular thing is a revenue note, often with the penny fund as a backing. I worry about the stormwater fund because they don't have that many revenues coming in for a stormwater bond fund. And water sewer related, well, is it a water sewer project and stuff?
Yeah,
So
I mean, you're right, and that's what I don't know enough about it yet, or haven't
Yeah.
thought through it enough, but it's kind of overwhelming, and we need to kind of look at it. We've got all these things, they're all important. It's, you know, you've got the staff recommendations, but then you've got a bunch of other things that people want to get done. So how do we deal with it? And you've got the knowledge, the staff has got the knowledge, and there's some outside people that have got the knowledge of how do we put this together? You've got the numbers for the most part, but how do we
Right.
put this together?
And if you tell me what, because we do have a financial advisor, and whenever, if you tell me what you're looking for, I'll get them on the phone and we'll talk about it and what you need.
You deal with that, okay? And let us know what you need from us, and if that's okay with the commission, as far as our discussion for this evening, is that acceptable to everybody? Okay. All right, City Manager, of course.
Okay, the last item, and it was depending, a lot on there was depending how we did timeline and stuff. So I think in 3, Ron, I think all we wanted to cover with 3 was some different areas of the budget, being the time, and we've had a good discussion. And I think the only thing we'll talk about in miscellaneous is an item that's not one of the department's heads coming up. It's the non-departmental general, and I think it's, what is the page on here that I got, 144 in your budget? If you took the big budget book, if you look at page 144, that's an item that got everything that's not assigned to the department. There's a lot of items you'll see in there. Like a large variety of things that we fund in that non-departmental. And again, we can ask more questions about this later, but I just wanted to point out some main things within that area. If you go, we'll just start on page 145 at the beginning, in line 31, professional services. You'll see a new item there that's estimated at $45,000. That's the budget for next year, the transition, the city manager transition, and the need, if you do that, you'll need to hire firms and stuff to look and get the, the quality the other cities that are doing it is gonna pay. So I wanna make sure in this budget, whenever we talk at a later time about when that time would come, that money would be in there, and that's the professional services item, and the estimates in there, and there's some cities going through that, so we'll kind of look at the cost of theirs, and I don't think it's gonna adjust down much from some of them. We'll look at some of what their searches did and what they cost, but I just put a placeholder in there for that, so that's something to note on there. The other big thing on the next page, the 2 big things to note at, in 49, the question is asked, what happens if something happens that you don't have in the budget? One of the big air conditioner units breaks down. One of the other things happen. That's the line where you see maintenance reserve other. And we've upped that, what, 150, 180 last year?
Last year was 134,000. I upped it to 200,000 this year.
So that is the money we have for those unforeseen things that break and that are a cost and that we need to do. So it's not a slush when somebody sees it, whoa, that's money sacked away there every year. And I don't think we've had many years when we've given some of that money back when we transition over the budget. There's not many times. We usually have to search the budget for more money. But that's where we account for things you can't account for, you don't anticipate happening. Something of major cost just breaks, and that's where that happens. And the last item, which is kind of the way if we had known about the budget advisory reservation, we probably wouldn't have called it reserve funding. It's called reserve funding here, but it's not in that last column. In the last column where it has the 6, that is the money. It's not to go unreserved or it's not reserved. That's the money when I gave you those worksheets last week. Where I had the money you had left in general fund, the money where if you do the positions that I told you, that's where that money, in essence, we had a balanced budget that we brought to the Budget Advisory Committee. It was balanced. This is the extra money minus some because we used some of the money to go from the 3% to 5%. But this is what's left from the property tax increase. And this is the money you have available for positions. This is the money you have available from any other general fund budget. Some of the items maybe we talked about may be funded from here. This is the item where your Budget Advisory Committee in one of the recommendations said they'd like to see some of that actually go to the reserves. I don't think they saw it as that, but again, it's money for you to allocate, and I think in my mind, in later, either the next meeting or as we get to the personnel, the one thing you have to decide is, what positions you're going to look for, because then when you subtract that out, you'll have another set of money, and that's the money that you have discretionary to do with what you want. Whether it's one of the items there, there's usually not that much money in the general fund for the city commission to decide what to do with. It's usually under 200,000 or sometimes less. So, but again, we have no positions funded in the budget. I gave you a list, not necessarily the ones that I recommend, but those are the ones from the list that we did last year that I think are most important or less likely. For instance, I said why I picked the police instead of the fire. I think we're almost assured to get at least those 3 positions. Like I say, they gave us the truck because they know they're out the fund. So the county money for 3 positions for them is signed. So the priority in that area, if you were going to fund positions this time, and I know there's questions about funding positions because we don't know where the economy's going, but we know we got a big increase there. So those positions or any of those positions I suggested, the public works to do more of the projects, probably the first thing you need to decide in that column is what positions that this board wants to do, and then you'll have a set of money left where, again, you'll have another decision to make on all the many things you have in general fund, what you would like to put there.
You handed out that list, right?
Yes.
Could you resend it to me?
Yeah.
Because I can't find it.
Okay, yes, yes.
I unfortunately found mine.
Yeah, he thought he didn't have his. I was going to send him, but he found it and stuff.
Might as well send it to everybody.
We'll send it to everybody. Again, there's a bunch of other things in. I mean, this is the hodgepodge of things that aren't in any particular budget. This was one of the things I was talking about, especially with 3 new commissioners on here, that there's a lot of department, but there's this one here at the end. And again, I wanted to emphasize some of the new, again, the funding for a possible future city manager search, where we put the reserve money for things that happen, and we don't expect them and we don't have them budgeted. And that to explain this bottom column, which is usually not there, that reserve fund is not there, and it probably should become excess fund. I don't know what the other title besides reserve, but the reserve you know, some of you ask questions, likely, so what, are you thinking of putting that into reserve or something? That's just the money we have that can be done for anything.
It's unallocated funds,
Yes,
right?
yes, unallocated. So the reserve, forget the reserve on here.
put
It's just
unallocated.
unallocated is probably the best word to put it in. And again, with all the other decisions that have, but again, there, as you see through, there's a variety of things, this funds that doesn't quite fit a particular area. So we didn't put on there for you to look at. So again, next meeting, you'll have more chance. And if you have any questions, seeing the time, any questions about these, you know, we can talk about, but I just want to point your attention, or if you have any, looking through it real fast tonight, any questions, we can deal with that, but we're getting close to time.
Do you have anything else?
What is the Greek
Vice Mayor Lunt, do you have any comments?
grant, Greektown grant? What is that all about?
That's the,
Matching grant, right?
Ron, with all these grants, I'm getting,
I mean, I know we have a facade grant with the CRA and stuff, but what's a Greektown grant?
Well, these aren't part of the CRA, they're just part of down in Greektown for them to do, I can't remember if it's restaurant work down there or whatever.
oh, the grants to the businesses.
Facade, then.
The facade grants, and that'll be in Karen Lemons' next, she's on tap next week when Karen Lemons comes up.
Yeah, I'm just talking
Yeah.
about in the non-departmental, this says Greektown grant, 25,000.
When we had the CRA grants that we gave to the businesses in the restaurant, obviously that could not fund the sponge docks because so the commission allocated the place to continue to be able to.
I didn't know we
to
still ran
fund
that program down there.
We still run it down, and we still have people, and we're encouraging people to fix up we're encouraging people to, and if they ever reach the point, like I told them, the problem is down at the docks a lot of times in the past, we've offered grants, but they won't take advantage of them. We beg them to. And we've told them, we're allocating this and keep moving it. If you go over and there's more need, that we'll come back to the commission and ask for another 20, we'll ask for an extension, but we're not gonna ask until you use the first 25 and stuff. So the reason that's in there, again, we can fund the CRA because we got a lot of money in the CRA to be able to fund programs like that, but the docks is excluded from that money.
Because
So
it's not in the
because it's not there, so they created that for that grant.
All right.
So there's two different CRAs then?
No, just one.
Okay.
But this is because they aren't one. They're able to do the same, their businesses, be able to take the same advantages of downtown. And we've got interest, there is some interest, and it is starting to be used now. And anything to improve the looks is a win-win for the city and for the docks owners.
Do you have any comments?
Maybe just one since we're talking about the Sponge Dock area and the Greek town. I know that the Greek Historical Society, or whatever they call themselves, have put forward a proposal. I just want to say that the company that they profess to use during this whole thing, they did basically an island in my hometown, and basically turned it from somewhere where you sort of had to go out of your way to want to go there to some place that's one of the most popular places on the Pacific West Coast. They do a tremendous job. And I actually hadn't, at the time that I knew the proposal was going through and stuff, but I have discussed with some of the people that were there in the city council and so forth at the time of how that went, and they said it went really well enough that they're continuing to use them for other areas of the city.
The project for public spaces
Yes, my pitch.
was actually here in the late 90s and told us what to do with our downtown. But we
Pardon
didn't
me?
do it. They were here in Tarpon and did a small report on what we should do with our downtown.
And you didn't,
We didn't do it.
you didn't like it?
But they were here. So they
I
are,
think
as
they
a matter
like
of
it,
fact, and as a matter of
they-
fact, we didn't have the report in the clerk's office or in the records or anywhere. And I called the project for, guess what? They dug it up. They still had it. And the two people that actually came here are their Emeritus too. They're still there, but they just consult when they have to, so.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that they'd done something
Yeah,
in downtown
yeah,
at all.
yeah, so, anyway, they're a good bunch of guys, or people, so. Anything else?
No,
Okay. Commissioner Carr,
I've got plenty of things to talk about, but I'm gonna wait till further meetings.
okay.
Excellent.
Commissioner Eisner,
Not a thing.
Commissioner Kulyas.
Yeah, I think we should plan for at least 3 budget meetings. No, we said
Okay.
that's it.
All right,
Yeah, and remember, we had a third one set, but it
higher?
falls right with your League of Cities thing, so we'll have to look for another date. That's why it took the 11, it ended up falling on the League of Cities date, so we'll have to just, if we have a third one, we're looking for another date to give you in August to replace the one where 2 of our commissioners are gone representing the city in Hollywood.
all right, let me say a couple of things. One, the one that was 600-something thousand, that was a good one, and something that the city manager and I discussed about where the money was coming from, and he and Mr. Herring explained that. The other thing was the $45,000 for recruitment of senior staff positions. That's basically for a headhunter, and that was and the city manager and I've had some ongoing conversations about this as far as how to approach this sort of thing, and there was some initial time frame of the spring of next year is what the city manager was thinking about, but from my perspective, I've shared this with him, and I think it's too early for that, just because of union contracts and some challenges, as you're saying now, that we've got to go through. So at some point, each of you need to talk to the city manager about this as far as your timing. I know that during the campaign, everybody here made certain, as a matter of fact, 7 out of the 8 candidates, I think there were 8 candidates, made certain representations to this fact. So I think you have to have some conversations with the city manager on this. Also, there's, just because you put out a search doesn't mean that you're going to have viable candidates. So I want to make sure it's clear that I'm not ready to start talking about transitions, unless there's a better situation than you're going to wind up with. So Bel Air just went through that, and it didn't work out real well for them. They hired an interim for $10,000 a month until they figure out what they're going to do next. They just didn't have, in their eyes, good candidates or somebody that was satisfactory for them. And so I don't know what's going to happen for us, but just keep that in mind. I also think it's very important. City manager's been here for next year will be 45 years, right? He's been a city employee for 45 years. He's extremely important to the city, and believe it or not, old city managers are important as far as resources. So you want to have people like long-term employees still available for questions and things like that, and having the full confidence of whoever's there in their place can go to them for information and things. So that's not easily replaced, and it takes a lot of experience to do that. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that this has got to be done in a very methodical way, a very mature way, and certainly not in a personal way, and just have your conversations with the city manager. The last thing I want to remind everybody is that our charter requires us to have personnel evaluations done in August. So please obtain copies of the personnel evaluation forms. They're new this year, right? We finally improved custom ones for each position, including Mr. Poulos, Ms. Jacobs, the city attorney, and Mr. LaCourse are the 4. Please work on those ahead of time, and let's get them in. And the reason why, theoretically, they're tied to what kind of a salary adjustment that individual would get going forward, whether they're doing a good job or not. But usually it's worked out that they get their salary adjustment as it's budgeted.
We're supposed to do a personnel evaluation for them after 3 months on the job?
Yes. Well, I'll just put down in there, for example, Mr. Poulos came on, I can't remember where, but actually that happened with me, with Mr. Trask, I can't remember, but there was one or two of them that were only here for just a couple of months, the exact same situation, and I gave the evaluation to the extent I can, and I just simply said that I'd reserve the rest of it until I've had another year of observing to be able to make a full evaluation the following year. But the charter still requires one, and so if you have, you'll see that there's some things that you can do, some things that are going to take more time for you to get experience with that individual before you make some comments with them. I went through that, and that's what I did. That's all I have on that note. Is there anything else that anybody's got to say? Any
Yeah.
comments?
Just one-
Okay, we're going to end the meeting now.
Yes.
Chief Young.
No comments.
Mr. Herring, I want to give you, do you have anything to say? You're there so patient, okay. Commissioner Kulyas.
Mayor, I wanted to follow up. Yeah, I'm in no rush for the transition. Putting money to the side is a smart thing, but our city manager's worked, I believe, well with all of us ever since we've got on board. It's been great so far, and I did have that Florida League orientation in which they did talk about the annual reviews, and more often than not, those meetings, or at least going over those annual reviews, are like a work session or a special session to discuss them in certain municipalities. So just wanted to get an idea if this board would be interested in doing that or not. So, thank you.
Commissioner Carr. I'm just going to go down the row. I don't have anything this week. We had the head military officer from Greece that came in Friday. We had awarded him the key to the city. We had a dinner at Dimitri's restaurant, which went very nicely. The commission was well represented there. A couple of the wives were there, which was very nice. The general had his wife, and a couple of the other two-star flag officers had their wives as well there, so that was very nice. And I've also, as a result of this, asked for a policy to be written on this, because the general had a fairly large entourage, which was a little overwhelming. So the idea behind the policy would be that once we get a request for a visit like that, we would send them the policy so they understand what the if they want to accept they invite themselves, but then we provide them the policy of what they should expect to get here as far as what the city's willing to do and
The
what it's not
entourage
to do.
policy.
Pardon me?
I said the entourage policy.
The entourage, yeah, that's basically it. But with a person that senior, that's not unusual at all, to have that many people accompany him. So, yeah,
I didn't think it was excessive giving his position, so,
no.
at
But
all.
for little old Tarpon Springs, you don't want to get into a habit of entertaining foreign ministers on a bi-weekly basis. You know, I know the key to the city is real popular with these guys, but you know, just what are we going to get out of it, I guess is what I'm getting at. So, City Manager, of course.
No, nothing else.
Vice Mayor Lund. Commissioner Eisner.
Well, I didn't think there were enough people that came because they dropped them off at the wrong restaurant. I had to pick them up at Heller's and bring them to Dimitri's. I mean, that was unbelievable. He was just lost. But all kidding aside, I also agree with what Commissioner Kulia said. I get along with the city manager very well. He knows when I'm not happy, and I know when he's not happy, and I usually win those any which way, so it really doesn't matter. But I have no qualms right now. I'm just glad that we spoke about it. I do have an issue that's coming up on Tuesday, and I do want to bring it up. Not now, of course. I'll just leave you all in suspense, but I think this was a good meeting. We do have a lot of this elephant to eat, and you can only just do whatever you can do. It's not easy to have a budget where you really need a lot more money than we have to spend. And no matter what we do, somebody's gonna be unhappy. And that's all I can say, so. And I did have a good time. That was the general was very nice. All the people were nice. I was very impressed to be there and very proud to be there to represent the city. So that's it.
Yeah. I think many of the things that we're looking at is just not a matter of convenience and a hassle. I think some of them are just go to the heart of Tarpon Springs. I think that having sidewalks around Craig Park that flood, fail, have to have cones on with ribbons and things like that is not just a matter of convenience, having to drive around town. You know, for example, you know, once that bridge starts working and we've got the intersection of you know, Spring Boulevard that's
In
still
MLK,
flooding in
yeah.
MLK.
Luther
You
King's
know, what are they going? The only way they're going to go into town is either go out Mears or down Klosterman and come into town that way, or else drive through Saltwater at that intersection. So there's some significant issues here associated with some of this stuff. I do encourage you to. I'm sorry, Ms. Jacobs. Do you have anything? I do encourage you to have a conversation with the city manager. This was one of my reasons for, he knows that. This was one of my reasons for bringing this up tonight, to get some feedback for him as well. So, okay. Is that all we have?
Yes.
Okay. Meeting adjourned at 10 p.m.